Hello and welcome to Divephoria Worlds 2022, episode 2. Joining us on this episode 2, baby! So there are 4 people here. Atlas.
4!
Myself, I'm Drakos. This is Sesame Street? No, we're Gotham Studios, but episode 4, now Sesame Street. Here's the Count of Vampire. Hard to say. Kobe is here. Azael's here too.
Good morning.
The 4 stack. Shout out to merch.riotgames.com for providing us some Worlds merch. Bam, bam. If you're in YouTube land, you can see it. If not, it's a puffy jacket and there's a LeBlanc statue.
Extremely puffy.
It is extremely puffy. It is very warm. If you are anywhere with a very cold climate, this is the jacket for you.
It's also not in here. It's not actually that cold.
Not that cold.
It's not the jacket for you.
This will have become a poor decision, but I am geared up. I feel like if I jump in water, I will float. Probably not. I don't want to advertise.
I don't think that's how that works.
There is location-specific merch for New York City, Atlanta, and San Francisco. Be sure to check it out. But yeah, a lot to talk about today. Week 2 of groups finished. Quarterfinals on the horizon. But Isaac, you had a very unique fan interaction. Probably the most unique fan interaction that I've ever heard of.
So I've actually had some really cool ones. Did you? So Freak and I are our new duo is Doug Duo.
Yeah.
So at one of the finals, someone actually brought us first edition Pokemon cards for a Diglett and Doug trio for both of us.
Holy crap! That's so cool.
It was a really cool gift.
That's awesome.
And then this time, so I made a joke one time on the dive about how people should send us their questions in with carrier pigeons, right?
Yeah.
And so someone came in, one of the fans came in and asked to take a picture, whatever. I was like, sure. And he gave me this, and he said, "So here's the carrier pigeon with the message with the question for the dive." So I said, I will read this on the dive. I have not actually looked at it. I'm sure I can get it out.
All right.
I haven't actually looked at it, so we're gonna see if I can actually read it. But thank you very much for this gift. This was actually really, really cool.
Well, let's not thank him until we've read what it says. It might say something really mean.
We also listed a bunch of different options when we were going through. Like all the ways that you could send it. So I'm looking to collect all the rest of them.
Okay.
Got it?
It says. Dear Azael, hope you remember asking for carrier pigeon messages. Long time dive listener, first time sending a carrier pigeon.
No.
That's shocking.
No, yeah, it is actually crazy.
Do you think runes would be more fun if they were twice as strong? So if the individual runes were way stronger.
Ooh.
So I will actually I will say that I actually thought that runes were more interesting when Runes Reforged first got released.
Yeah.
Because they weren't so homogenized. Now they all just kind of feel the same because they're you think about it, it's okay, what's the difference between PTA and Electrocute and Comet and Airy and Conqueror and Lethal Tempo? They all just increase your damage, and it's really just whichever one fits the combat pattern of your champion. I actually feel like they're pretty boring.
It doesn't change by that much as well.
They had a hard time bouncing at the beginning. There are still some differences. They're not all different from each other.
Yeah.
Phase Rush,
Lethal Tempo is cool with the attack range increase and stuff like that. So that there are some. I definitely get that.
I think if Phase Rush was doubly as powerful, Poppy would never die ever in the game. It just would never happen.
Double speed phase rush is actually hilarious.
Double
that does sound pretty funny.
Double slow. Double damage reduction. I mean, obviously you couldn't just double all the numbers and have that be balanced or double.
I really like this double phase rush though.
Double phase rush sounds amazing.
It's already so fast. I like to imagine that August is the one that created phase rush as well, because he puts 3 hit passives on everything, and he's I can put it on any champion. Everybody can have a 3-hit passive if they want.
Can you imagine just trying? You're like a Renekton trying to trade against a Gnar in lane. And he takes phase rush. He procs his little hyper proc, and there's just bam out the speed of light. You're like, I need more dashes. Give me more dashes. I can't keep up.
Gnar never builds boots ever again. Lumbers up to a fight like this, and then goes boop boop boop.
Just instantly Mega Gnar's just.
The question is, would it be more fun, right?
Yes.
So it would definitely be more fun.
I think put it in Earth. Make sure you just double all the runes in
just
Earth.
Comet Storm. It's not just double the damage. It's your whole screen.
Okay, that's more than double. That's more than double. You can have 2 comets.
No. To be fair, I just imagine the situation where it's level 1, you're wandering into lane, you get hooked by double Hail of Blades Pike, and you don't even see your health bar is just gone.
It just becomes anime swordsman where they just go. and then you die.
Yeah. Maybe it should just be a whole new game mode. It's just basically Path of Exile League of Legends, and you've got like the runes are just absolutely absurd, the gigantic skill trees and shit. That's what I want.
I would say I do like the philosophy. I feel like they've had to like knock stuff down so much to keep things in line, and I think that overall strayed towards a lower power level. I wouldn't have mind if everything just got buffed to compensate. Like I like that balanced philosophy more, like in fighting games or whatever, where like when one thing's OP, just buff everything else. But I understand how that ends you up with like
that's a bit
that can be very problematic very quickly.
They just did this durability patch to calm everything down and bring down the damage and everything. And now we're like, all right,
destroy
double all of the damage runes.
Yeah.
Go.
Just imagine the Lucian Nami electrocute interaction is still in the game. Nami level E, just level 1 E.
Level 1, you die from 100%.
You just
double electrocute proc.
I mean, that's what happens at 15 minutes. You may as well just make it happen at the beginning. You know, what's the point?
That's the Dardock quote. Whatever. Just pick me anything. Let me lose in peace.
I'm just pitching this. We've had the durability update. The murderability update has not, like.
Hey, there we go. There we go.
That's just double.
Although I think that was why the durability update happened, was because we were in the murderability.
Murder meta.
It's 2.0. It's the Zetterbed
update.
Oh,
to be
hell
fair, though,
yeah.
one rune that I think would be super dope is double range Hex Flash. Just like imagine double
just
range
old
Hex Flash.
Flash.
I honestly
Hex
think
Flash becomes old Flash.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the first one. I'm going face rush every time. I'm fucking out of here.
You will never proc electrocute on me, sir. You will hit 2 abilities and I will be gone. I will run back to base.
Can you see me? Can you see me now?
You don't even take TP anymore. You don't even take. You just hit the guy once, proc double phase rush, and run back to base.
Oh shit! How do you double the power of teleport?
Ooh.
It's just half the cooldown.
Cooldown.
But I mean, that's a summon
No,
spell,
you bring
so
a copy of you with you when you teleport in.
Oh,
You're double
shit.
time.
It's Elden Ring. It's a mimic tier for Elden Ring.
Oh, no. Your teleport now always brings one of your teammates, no matter what happens, and you get to elect the teammate, like Callista, So like at the beginning of the game, you're like, you're coming with me every time I TP, and you can just take someone with you.
This version of League of Legends sounds like what I imagine the player experience is when you haven't played since 2011 and you queue up against like an Akali. You're like, what is this? Absolute nightmare status.
The double the phase rush power is actually Zeri. We made that. It's in the game. Welcome to the future.
So really, if you want to play with double strength runes, you just have to play specific champions.
True.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for the carry pigeon. That was actually an awesome gift. Appreciate it.
It was also a great question as well.
Yeah, fun question. And it wasn't like a murder note or anything. It was wholesome.
We were ready fully to
Nope, can't read that.
You can't read that. Like, you know what? We appreciate the carry pigeon, but we will not be saying that live on air.
All right, on to a bit more serious of a topic. Well, a lot more serious of a topic. The GAM versus top game. Obviously it ended. I'm not sure who originally discovered the bug. I heard that it was someone on Chinese forums or something like that. Billy or whatnot. But I saw it first from Vandrel, who was tweeting about it, and he's kind of like the bug discovery guy. Man, or at least like calculates if there are bugs or not. So I mean, the TLDR, if you guys haven't seen it, is that Jackie Love's Mauve Malamardia's shield did not proc when he got Karth assaulted. And theoretically, we'll never know 100%, but it seemed to me, I will say, that he should have been able to get an auto or two in on the Nexus if it had procced with the additional health that he would have had, which likely would have ended the game. Then, of course, we're in a different timeline where maybe they don't win the next 2 games, but assuming that happened, then maybe they win the tiebreaker, maybe they're through, maybe they win Worlds, who knows?
I mean, yeah, I think even without the context of the what ifs, it's just a really unfortunate situation because it just brings in all of those what ifs, even if they're not necessary. Even if we just are able to take that put that one game into a vacuum, the fact that we even have to ask that question obviously really hurts the competitive integrity of that game and of that situation, of that group situation, of the teams moving through.
Especially considering how much they smashed all their other games.
That's my problem. They look like the best team on the day in that group.
What if they had a tiebreaker?
Yeah, and it's different if the group isn't so crazy close too. You know what I mean? Like if Rogue had kept up their week 1 performance and had dominated the rest of the way through and they were like clearly not going to make it, then it would have been like, obviously it's still bad. It's still not what you want, but it certainly would not have felt nearly as bad. And it's a weird situation because, like players are supposed to pause when they see a bug. And in that heat of the moment, maybe it's something that gets missed, but it is really unfortunate because how are you going to even have the presence of mind?
There's no way you notice.
Yeah, you're not going to make that calculation.
I was like, there's no way I'm pausing at that moment because I'm like, one hour hit on the Nexus, you know?
Yeah, you're not even
and
thinking about
apparently the cooldown of the Maw did go.
It did go, yeah.
So
Oh.
it looked. So if you looked afterwards, it
Yeah,
would
he
look
had
like
the
went up.
lifeline
And it's
passive.
God,
He just didn't get
I
the
would have been
shield,
thinking,
apparently, yeah.
Karthus is OP. You
Yeah.
know, it just blasted through
I mean,
me.
that's doubly brutal because I didn't know that piece of context, so I thought maybe like it's something on Jaculo's side where he sees, you know, there's no cooldown, like it hasn't gone off.
No,
and
it went on
he has a
cooldown, yeah.
window where he can like he literally would have had the opportunity to look down, see it didn't proc in the last
Mhm.
fight, and like be like, oh damn, pause.
Yeah.
But if that also went on cooldown, then that's just like
I mean,
that's rough.
I just think it's so impossible to really like recognize and figure out what you should do in that situation when it's like, you know, your tournament life is on the line here.
Yeah.
You are going to be so like adrenaline shot, just like turbo focused on this thing. And then once you die, you're probably thinking of nothing else other than we lost the game, we're out of Worlds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so you're not exactly in the like state of mind to analyze it all.
Well, also, like, you don't get pauses for those sorts of bugs, right? You get pauses for bugs that change the expectation of a thing that has just happened in front of you, right? Like, if you're expecting an interaction and it doesn't happen, like, for example, like an Anivia goes in for a trade because they have egg, they move back onto turret, and then egg doesn't go off, you're going to be like, I think there's a problem here because I was expecting this to happen. Whereas, like, you don't go in being like, oh, I'd calculated for 1600 damage, but that actually did 1900 damage to me at that particular moment in time. You know, like, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Because like you're focused on how much health the Nexus has.
That's like, I remember there was this bug ages ago with Mundo where his cleaver is supposed to do damage based on your current health percent,
Mhm.
and it just did it as though you were 100% the whole time. So like Mundo cleavers just did way more damage even when you were low. And I literally played multiple games of Mundo and I just didn't even notice, right? Because you just like, it's just not really something you.
No, and also
necessarily
it felt great for you playing the
Yeah,
Mundo.
I was like, wow, I'm having some
You're
great
like, damn,
games.
Mundo is strong.
Yeah,
I'm
I was
insane
like,
at this
wow,
game.
these are good games. But
Mhm.
it's just easy to not necessarily notice things when you're thinking about all these other things. Is my point. Like when there's, like, as you say, if a specific interaction doesn't work or whatever, but like damage differences, I'm with Kobe. I would just be like, oh my god, Karthus is so OP to kill me through Ma. Like, but how many times?
the
how many times
Karthus,
have you
to
died
be
through
fair,
shield balls and
was
stuff?
pretty OP at that point in the game
Yeah.
as well. Like he
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
was 4-item Karthus. Like that's
With
scary.
first strike.
Yeah.
And all I would be thinking about in top situation now is like the what ifs, because I feel like people are so quick to say, okay, well, if you like barely made it in groups, you're shit anyway, so you never would have done anything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
people, I think, really forget that a team can start slow in a tournament and win the tournament, right? Look at MSI 2019. G2, 5-5 in groups.
Mhm.
TL, 4-6 in groups. TL goes up against IG, who is 9-1 and the reigning world champions, and beats them. G2 takes down T1 and G2 wins the tournament, right? And they went 5-5 in groups, right? So like if you ended the tournament at that point, 50-50 record, same thing as what top ends up with, you'd be like, well, of course, they're never going to beat IG anyway. So like, who cares? Like, stop complaining. But the reality is we don't know how far they could have gone, right?
Yeah.
And I think I feel really bad for the players.
Yeah, especially like the volatility of individual best of ones as well. That's why people have been clamoring for, you know, reworks on structures for tournaments and stuff like that for quite a long time. But
Yeah, I think regardless of structure, it's always going to feel bad. But on top of the fact that groups is already such a volatile format, and that like a single best of one, you know, a single bad day, a single bad meta read can essentially, you know, end your tournament. And obviously, you're always going to have chances. You know what I mean? Like 3-3 record at the end of the day is never going to be a perfect run. But you know, even like we look back to NA, we were talking about this in week one, like bad meta reads. Obviously, were not the only reason Cloud9 struggled, but they're coming out playing like Nidalee Fiora, and you're like, they're going to call in a best of 5. That's an oopsie. You go next game. You got more chances to turn it around. You get more chances for redemption. But in a best of 1, that same cheese can obviously like win you games. Unique strategies can win you games, but you can also lose on the smallest things, the smallest mistakes.
yeah, the other side of that coin is that then people are like, that's what the tournament is. Like, you know,
Yeah.
that's what we're testing.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that like best of 1 comes with some hangups. It comes with some
Yeah,
strengths.
I think it's just, to me, it's just that the other games that they played that day were just so clearly like these giant stops that you're just like, wow, that really gives you the big what if.
Yeah, there's actually been a few calculations of like what the LCK would have looked like if it was best of ones and things like this. Like, for example, like T1's undefeated streak that they went on in spring would have looked vastly different if it had been all based on best of ones, because they haven't historically been a team that's good at winning the first game in a best of 3.
Yeah.
I think you play, like, you draft differently though if it's a best of 1. I think you play very differently if it's a best of 1. So I think these sort of comparisons on like best of series versus best of one is a little bit skewed if you just take it in the format and the context of a best of three. But best of three is so much more fun because you actually have that strategic depth.
Oh, I'm an LCK caster. I have best of three. That's so cool. Strategic depth.
Just a bit of a hint for the future, gentlemen.
I have 4 teams through to best of 5 stage. I'm so special and great.
It's still not the best
man.
region in the world, though. Don't worry.
We actually have to listen to anything Max says and have to be like, oh, well, I guess you're right.
Yeah.
The absolute
No.
flex.
No.
You bust out anything you want.
Well, no, I can't because I'm the play-by-play, right? So, like, it's the analytical presence shouldn't necessarily be there. I'm just all gloating.
It is so crazy, though, because we've been talking about this stat where there's only ever been 2 LCK teams ever that did not make it out of groups. Like, that longevity, that consistency.
And one of them's a favorite to win the tournament this year. Good old GenG.
That was a big year for us, though, baby. We needed that one.
We definitely have to live up some of those for a while. This was a rough year for us, but I mean, another thing obviously going on the final day of the groups was RNG having to play from isolation.
Yeah.
Those players looked like they were really struggling on the player camps.
I mean, their last game
that
was dog shit. It was not good. It was not good. And I think like I, in the moment, was thinking like, oh man, they're underperforming. And I'm like, the LCK guy inside me is like, oh, GenG is so good. But then like you realize that it's the last game of the day and they're like dying in their room. Like, I think it's a little bit less of a GenG performance and a little bit more of
it was hard looking at those player camps.
Yeah.
Like they looked really, really dead.
Yeah, because I think that like you could see, especially like if you just look at Shahu, right? Like the 100 Thieves game, Shahu was playing like an absolute monster. And like some of that, obviously, like he can still play worse game to game or better game to game. But it always, again, similar to the bug or whatever, whenever you know that a player is playing under less than ideal circumstances, and especially illness, and especially an illness that so much of us have had or had experience around, you know how hard it can be. It just puts that question mark. It puts that like asterisk next to the wins, next to the games. And it's just always, it feels bad. I mean, the good news for them as opposed to JDG is they do get out. They do hopefully get more time to recover and feel good ahead of their super important series versus T1. But yeah, that was rough. And I cannot imagine, I can't like, casting obviously is very voice focused. So people won't even ask you to cast if you're like, you have a sore throat or whatever. So the fact that pro players are still playing under those circumstances is impressive. Like shout out to them that they are still performing, that they are not asking to like take a step back, that they are not as a whole asking to take a step back. But that is brutal. And also it feels bad for their opponent too. Because now you're like, well, we won.
Yeah, the asterisk goes both ways.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good for anybody. It's like when someone cheeses you in solo queue and it works, they're like, oh, I beat you with cheese. And you're like,
let me say,
cheese
from
is legit,
experience,
man.
I feel great when I cheese people. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
The problem is I would never want to play against someone cheesing because if you lose, right, you're like, well, I just tried to cheese. And if I win, I'm like, well, they just tried to cheese. What do I get out of this?
I mean, one of my favorite professional players of all time is Parting, and he is a professional player because he's good at cheese. He just cheeses he's the best cannon rusher in StarCraft history.
I get your philosophy, but I've tasted it.
I don't like the
and I
caveats.
really like the feeling of winning with cheese.
And to be fair, every time I play a fighting game, I play stupid characters who have one move they're good at because I don't have time to be good at all the moves.
Were you a Mortal
Kombat button?
Were you a Sonya main in Mortal Kombat? You just did that handstand? The handstand back and forth?
Shigoro, whatever Shigoro is called.
You know
She just jumps up and down. That's all she does. She has one move. She just jumps up and down. Her only other move is jump up and come down slightly slower.
They made a character for you in Soul Calibur called Maxi because even if you just spam one button, he does other stuff with his nunchucks. So it looks like you're sick, but he just like keeps on doing all this shit. You're like, oh, I'm insane.
No, you play the GameCube version of that game, and you like at the very beginning you just push your opponent to the edge, and you play Link, and he just boops them off the edge. You just spam the grab, and he boops them off the edge every time.
Yeah, so anyway, just to be clear, the cheese discussion is not a one-to-one with the RNG discussion. Very, very different. But I think it's the same, some of the same feelings, and obviously the context of asterisks, because yeah, they're not.
We've had a few of those in the LCK as well, and it hasn't been fun to be able to like work out what does it mean when players are feeling so unwell that the games, you can see the quality has adjusted, the amount of substitutions that have had to happen over the last couple of years as well, based on players not feeling well.
Yeah.
Like, I think like you just need to look at how BDD has looked this year in comparison to his amazing Worlds performance to know that like just COVID sucks, and it's just.
Yeah.
I
Really
mean,
shit.
we live in the real world, so
Yeah,
we're
right.
gonna have to deal with stuff.
Yeah. The other thing I will say is that even like COVID and whatnot is obviously a different story. But even beyond that, like the teams are always going to have some struggles at events, right? And I think that like largely people just don't talk about it because it's like everyone deals with this stuff, right? And everyone has to deal with it, so like no one cares, kind of. But it's like it's very rare for any pro in any game to go to an event and just like have perfect sleep and feel really relaxed and
Food issues,
exactly,
lots of
right?
stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's so many times where you go to an event and you'll talk to players and whatever, or even in the events that I went to where it's like you just don't, you're up all night, you're playing on zero sleep because like people are super stressed. It's your whole year leading up to this one thing that you're super anxious, super stressed. It's all you can think about. So the players are already playing in tough circumstances a lot of the times, but everyone deals around with it. So it's not really an excuse. And the reality is part of being successful as a pro is handling pressure and handling these difficult circumstances really, really well, right? And that's why it is so impressive when people can really rise to the occasion, because I think about all the extenuating circumstances that people aren't necessarily playing in under ideal conditions for them, right? Because they're tired and they're stressed and they're this and they're that, and maybe they're sick and they don't like the food or they're missing home or whatever, but they can still do all these incredible things. And I think that just kind of makes it even more amazing.
Yep. There's always that thing that if the K-Town in the area is good, the Korean teams are going to perform better, because the quality of the kimchi is important.
Yeah.
Like it's actually a thing because
We
Korean
need to
food
host
is
worlds
vastly
in
different.
like Omaha.
Yeah.
Well,
wait,
like-
what is the NA secret? Like, I mean, you guys have a lot of Canadian players too. Like, how do we do this? Like, what is the universal? Because kimchi is so like universal, and this is the problem. Is like Europe, we have so many different. Like, what is the universal European food? Do I like need to like sit down with the Polish guys?
I don't think, the
Look, bros,
European
I
food's
got you the
difficult.
pierogies lined up. Trim me. I need an ace game today. I got pierogies on lock, bro.
Well, maybe
Don't worry.
that's-
We
maybe
flew
that's the
out this
problem.
Grandma from Poland. I don't know if she understands what I need from her. I'm gonna bring over a translator, but I swear the pierogies are gonna be fire, bro. I really need you to show up against JDG.
Yeah. Well, I think there just needs to be it needs to be doctored for the team that you have.
Each individual player, even.
Yeah, each individual player needs their own chef that has brought their own perfect ingredients.
And that's
grandmas
really
from across Europe.
Yeah.
And that's really
one of them is making
that's
pasta.
what's been
Yeah,
holding the West
pierogies,
back,
yeah.
if we're honest. You know what I
lack
mean?
of grandmas.
There's a lack of
A
grandmas,
lack of grandmas.
supporting the. You got sports psychologists. Where's
Yeah.
the sports grandma?
We need American grandmas making apple pies. We need Italian grandmas making wonderful pasta.
Now I'm just imagining the resume for a sports grandma, and it's like I could be an Italian grandma. I could also be, a German
I
grandma.
have a certificate in German grandmaing.
No matter
My list of
no matter what physique
Masters
you
in
are,
being
I'm gonna
an
walk up
American
to you and say
grandma.
you don't look like you've been eating enough, and try to give you food at all times of the day. You just ate. You probably need to eat more. The grandma
Are you
qualification.
growing?
Yeah,
not
yeah,
the
exactly.
not the cheek pinch.
Just the question of are you hungry at all stages of the day, no matter what has just happened. You've just sat down for breakfast. Oh, are you leaving? Are you hungry?
Yeah.
It's like, Grandma.
We'll make statements approximately based around League of Legends.
Yeah.
Oh, did you kill the worm thing this game? Did you get it? Did you knock it down?
Are you winning, son?
Are you winning?
To be honest, a lot of those questions are very grounding. I think it's actually probably good. I think esports grandma required those questions.
CSD
as
going
well.
up at least 10.
Yeah,
with,
no,
with
straight
a
up.
professional esports grandma on your team.
The grandma diff. It's a tough. We're finding angles, guys.
We are.
Yeah.
Because copium is not enough. We need creative
We need
strategies
angles.
and copium.
Based on weeks 1 and 2 for NA and definitely weeks 2 for EU, we need the grandmas. We need something because this was, I will say, felt like, especially week 2 overall, felt like the biggest gap for any international tournament I've ever watched between the West and the East.
Well, it also is statistically. This is the only time that there's only been one Western team get past groups. 2 was our previous lowest, as combined NA and EU, and this is the first time there's just one.
I mean, record-wise for NA, it's the worst performance we've ever had. I know a lot of people, and I know this is annoying you, and this is annoying me too. People are like, well, what's the big deal? It's just a normal day for NA. And it's like, well,
this
no,
is
it's
historically low. This is literally our worst ever.
not. By a lot.
Yeah.
and for EU as well, right? Like 1-9 in the last week, and it felt like almost 0 competitive games besides the one win. I know there was the one G2 game where you were saying it was kind of competitive,
like the JDG, the Darius game, but even that it felt like the writing was on the wall. But G2 were still fighting back and getting some good fights.
Yeah, and so it was rough, right? Like obviously I'm always going to cheer for LCS first. But then I do want there to be competition amongst the regions because I want it to feel not like a foregone conclusion, but like I was shocked the way that the LEC teams were losing, right? It wasn't just that there was losses, it was that almost every game felt over instantly, and like the only teams NA was beating was EU, which like isn't really a good look for either of us, where it's like, we're both kind of down in the dirt slinging mud at each other, and the banter and stuff is all fun, right? Like, and I'm on there trash talking you, people are trash talking me, I'm also trash talking NA, like, but it's like, it sucks, man. Like this was a rough one.
I mean, yeah, I didn't have high expectations for either of our regions coming into this, and I was pleasantly surprised, obviously, with week 1 for Fnatic and Rogue especially. But I will say that this was, because normally you're right. Normally it's like 3-3, and like our teams are like scraping past each other in a tiebreaker, and that's how they're getting out of groups. So it really does feel neck and neck, and it feels like hope regardless of form. And this time it was just getting beat down every single game, and the absolute free fall. And you guys obviously had a rough week 1, but the absolute free fall for an EU caught me off guard because Rogue like instilled a lot of faith after week 1. Was I willing to jump on the train 100%? No, but I was like, okay, for sure there's going to be at least 1 or 2 redeeming games here, and that really was not the case. And G2, they struggled, they kept struggling. Fnatic, again, it felt like absolute and total collapse, and again, not ready for it. And so different from the Fnatic in the past, where it always felt like struggle at the start, rally at the end, knocking out RNG or whatever, and it just, this year it's just like, damn, I don't even have any like narrative copium to fall back on. It's just like we just got slapped around the
Welcome
entire
to the
tournament.
club. That's what usually happens to us. Where
No, but it's not what usually happens. Usually there's some good games and we're like just like a little bit above you, or we like beat you down, and there's like, this is rough for both of us. Like we're both embarrassed right now.
Yeah, I think there's like a really bad thing though, which is the fact that it's 2 years in a row now and this year is worse. And so with the gap conversation that always comes up, I remember 2018, 2019, we were talking about the gap closing. Like it was done, finally.
2018 was such a, like...
that was a hype year. And like 2019 as well, like TL and G2 in a final for MSI. Like, oh my God, like that was super hype. But now it's like, it feels like when it's starting to feel more doomed as time passes, that's when like, you have real issues.
And credit really to both the LCK and LPL for continuing to develop. I feel like it's such a breakneck speed, because in 2019 we were unironically saying that like LEC was probably the second best region in the world, and that was contentious. But like all 3 LEC teams getting out of groups, and yes, the Fnatic one was a pretty big miracle, but the shift over time, I'm not sure if it is a representation of LCK LPL again just developing faster, or if LEC is just getting weaker. And I think that definitely our region has been a little bit weaker this year, but overall, going from that to what we're experiencing now, where it just feels like we're back to Korea's the better at us than everything, LPL is better at us than everything, is a wild change to happen in the course of 2-3 years.
And I do think like my personal take on it is kind of, it feels like the older crop of stars that kind of brought us to some of those heights in LEC and LCS are fading a bit. And I don't think our new stars are yet developed to that same level. Because when you think about a lot of the highest highs for EU, you think of Perks and Caps, right?
Yep.
And they're just not like, whether it's them individually or their teams or like a combination or whatever, they're just not hitting the same levels that they had hit in those previous years, right? Which I think, those guys were the centerpiece of most of those incredible European runs, right?
Well, like I'm so glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about this, because the LCK was looking worse and worse, honestly, over that 2018, 2019 period. Like 2019 was like the T1 super team where all of these great players got together and achieved basically nothing. And it was like really, really sad. And we had the KT being pretty disappointing that year as well. And that was a super team. There was like 2018, 2019 was getting all of the old guard and seeing whether all of the best was going to be able to win. But what actually turned everything around and what made the difference was Sandbox, Griffin, Damwon, like making their way in. Like I remember in 2018 where like you had finalist teams at Worlds, scrimming these
Yeah.
challenger teams and getting bopped. Like, that was the exciting time, and that's where like things have turned around. It's like getting this new talent and being able to foster it and nurture it. A lot of it comes down to some really, really good like academy programs that have been built in the LCK. Like Berserker wouldn't exist without T1 Academy. Like T1 built so much amazing talent. Like Zeus, Gumayushi, and Owner are all like pretty much homegrown within T1.
I mean, even if you look just outside of that, this era of LCK talent is so cool. And Chovy's probably just outside of that era, but obviously it's been rising up with that talent around him. You look at like
I think he was like the beginning, right? Like it's him and Showmaker that sort of like came up together. Well, of course, Canyon as well, like the whole Damwon roster. But I think that was the turning point. That was the start.
Yeah, and it feels like they've brought and like that. We've also seen the shift. Obviously, people talk about like the old school LCK strategy when you had perfect vision, you make perfect decisions, and it feels like the LCK as a whole has developed so much. But yeah, this new crop of talent is like Doc Dam, Aphelios God. Like there's a lot of players I'm excited about, even when they're not, objectively best in their role. You look at Viper, who obviously, played for EDG. There's a lot of Korean talent. You guys, like Cornucopia. Like it is incredible how many players are already almost like household names internationally, just having spent like a couple years here.
But like they weren't there in like the 2018, 2019. And go back to Azael's point, like you have to like find out where that next superstar is going to come from. And I know in America, it's kind of funny that it's Bjergsen that was such a center point, and he did come from EU to begin with, but like being able to find that next superstar, like Jensen as well, are just amazing players, but a lot of these are imported after finding success instead of homegrown and built in North America.
Well, I mean, Jensen literally played only his games in LCS. He never played his thing, so to be fair. But I mean, I think also like that era was the double lift, sneaky, those kind of guys and stuff as well. And I mean, the clear like new era now is EG, right? With JoJo and Danny obviously wasn't here, but like those are the clear obvious like young NA stars that we're hoping can develop into that and can bring us some of that success in the coming years. And I do think one of the positives that I will come away from this tournament with from NA perspective is that EG, even though like they went 1-5 like the other teams, they actually had more competitive games and under much tougher circumstances. Having to basically have a sub here, yes, a month in advance or whatever
for one of their star players.
Yeah, right.
First team.
All I hear about is Danny's pentakill, and then I don't get to see him.
Well, and it's like the team was literally built around this play style of feed the Danny, and he's first team All Pro in LCS, and they have to come here without him. And so yes, they do as well as they wanted. No, of course I was hoping they would do better, but I still thought we saw some development of some of those players like Vulcan and JoJo from what they look like at MSI to here.
And they got through plans. That was big.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We're able to take down Mad, which was exciting for us. And there's obviously a tremendous amount of EU grown talent, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of where we have to look towards because a lot of these super teams, like you were talking about the super teams in Korea, but like Vitality didn't even make playoffs. TL didn't even make Worlds, right? Like a lot of these super teams, either it's just like too many cooks in the kitchen and they're not gelling well, so that's why, or it's an overrating of these old names who aren't necessarily at the same level that they used to be.
Yeah, and I think it's just a lot of these teams, and I can't speak to the LCK off seasons as much, and you're welcome to step in if you feel like the LCK is wildly different or similar. But I feel like in the West, it's so volatile, and I feel like orgs have a really hard time pinning down that person that's really worth investing in and just moving the pieces around that one person.
I mean, that's actually exactly what the LCK has kind of tried to put in place with their new like. It's end of 2023 it's going to come through, but it's like all of these teams now getting to choose their star player. That's the only player on the team that they're allowed to have extended contracts for. There are certain salary caps for said star player, but then you like have to spend a certain amount. Like it's a huge document, and I admit that I didn't pay as much attention when I was reading through it because it was absolutely gigantic. But it's a really interesting theory based on pretty much exactly what you're talking about, where you want to add that little bit of stability. When you become a fan of a team, you want to be a fan. Like one of the reasons why SKT/T1 was so extraordinarily successful is because Fake has been there forever. and you get to rally around this guy. And yes, a lot of the other names have changed, but you always have the most popular guy on the team still there being that general.
And that's why I think
that was important.
G2 is a comparable example where they kept Caps Yankos this year, and why they're able to find so much success is still because those two are rocks for the team. Because even when the team as a whole looked shaky, they were always performing well. Even if their bottling was struggling at this tournament, those two were always making an impact as a whole. And I wonder, I hope that for the next generation of talent, when teams or orgs find a promising star, whether it's JoJo or Danny or anyone else, that they like actually get the time to like configure the roster around them to give those guys the time to shine. Because I just think that like EU right now this year was a bunch of random, highly disappointing super teams. And I just think that like that generation of players we can't just keep making super teams with that generation of players. Like there has to be new players if EU wants to be successful. And I think it's probably the same for the LCS.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's why we were so excited about Champions Queue. So we've got a really nice new playground basically. For them to grow and hone their skills.
Yep. I've heard with some Master Yeast that Odawamne was very upset.
Work in progress.
Work in progress. Well, you know.
It's also
Rome was not built in a day. This is
aspiring champions.
Exactly. This was literally the first year, and we didn't even have the full first year.
And there are rules about like one tricks as well.
We're
right?
making a lot of improvements coming for next year.
It says champions queue, not champions, except for Master Yi queue. So it does it's inclusive of all inclusive for champions.
Yeah, but I mean, if you are that one trick, you have to also branch out into be like multiple toxic champions as well. Yeah. So like you could play like maybe you'd be like a Master Yi,
Headhunter Master Yi. Yeah. You could play Totem Master Yi. You could play Cosmic Master Yi.
Yeah, no, you could play all of the different versions of that. That's a big champion pool, actually.
Yasuo, Yi,
yeah,
Rengar.
It'd have to be like Yasuo, Yi, and Zed. You'd have to like when you have to flex to bot lane, you play Zed.
Just get all of those.
I'm 09, bros. I'm scaling. One more death will be there.
Oh Jesus.
Biggest surprise though for the group stage. I mean, I think that the easy obvious standout is top esports in this struggle. Obviously,
yeah, but that wouldn't have been a surprise.
It's funny because everybody, we all came in and we're like, all right, what's your prediction? Oh, well, I know at least one LPL team is going to explode and crash and burn. Yep. But then you're always still surprised when it happens. You're like, wow, it was top this time. So there's like, it's kind of weird that it's built this expectation that one of these LPL teams is just going to have, some sort of collapse.
Shout out to LGD in 2015. I feel like the OG.
Oh, God.
OG absolute collapse, by the way.
Yeah.
No, I also remember EDG in that year. I remember going back. I was doing an interview with Suzy Kim. I've told the story a few times. I was doing an interview with Suzy Kim while EDG were facing Fnatic. And I'm like, I'll just let EDG smash this team. It'll be so fine because that team's so good. The interview came back and they were already dead. What happened this year?
You interview cursed them. That's interesting. New tactics, not the caster.
Yeah, it was definitely, I ran it in that. And also I was talking about how good EDG were in the interview whilst I couldn't see the game.
In the background, the screen is up and you just see EDG getting pounded.
It's like that coach interview meme in real time where it's like, oh my God, TSM, they're so slick. Hanser, always impressive, crushing the top lane as he's like getting killed or something behind you.
It was exactly how it happened.
Just do me a favor, and if you could sit down with, if Suzy wants to do an interview with you, I'm not going to, call Suzy back to LoL Esports. But like, if anyone would like to interview Atlas specifically about how great JDG are, that would.
I'm psyched to do that.
Maybe on Thursday.
On Thursday morning, preferably.
5 p.m.
5 p.m. If you could start the interview at like 5:05 once
EST.
No particular reason. But
my DMs are open, so hop in there. Totally fine.
I mean, I think the biggest surprises feel either it's top. I mean, yes, it's kind of expected that one team will crash and burn, but I feel like most people were looking at the lower seeded teams to be maybe the ones who did it, right? Yeah. Because top and JDG were so neck and neck that it's like I was calling top seed 1.5, right? You know what I mean? It's
true.
like they went 10 games against them.
And that was some of the best of fives that we've ever seen. And the funny thing is that part of the reason why top didn't make it out is because the Jackie Love moment that, cost them game 5s and things like this, he was amazing until he wasn't. That's Jackie Love, and it's been Jackie Love for forever.
Oh man, his interview after group,
gut-wrenching,
holy
man.
moly.
Yeah,
that just hit me again.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Mark gave an interview where he said he's, I guess, gonna think about retiring because of the result, which I was just like, that is brutal. So, I mean, who knows how the players will feel in a couple of weeks or a couple of months or whatever, but it's a feeling that, you know, your heart goes out to these players from everywhere, right? It's your heart and soul is poured into it for an entire year. For players like Jackie Love, you know, the reason they play is to try to win worlds, to try to win these international events, to really try to represent their region. And you're working towards that for this one shot that you get after an entire year of hard work, right? And when it doesn't go right, it's going to be...
And they were so close, like few auto attacks on a Nexus away from getting towards those tiebreakers after being like one game away from being able to be the LPL champions, you know, and prove themselves in that way. Like, I think it's even more brutal than if JDG hadn't have made it up, because at least like JDG got that achievement and they managed to make it to LPL champion, which is
surprise because everyone's going to do that same.
Yeah, I mean, I want the positive surprise.
I've got another surprise.
Yeah.
It is a positive surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Do you want to try and guess or anything? No.
I mean,
the Heimerdinger support actually made it from because I'm literally watching Chamsky like every night or whatever. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, actually, what the hell is going on? They're not supposed to troll in Chamsky. Like, if you get reported, they will kick your ass out forever from Chamsky. And everyone keeps start playing this Heimerdinger. I'm like, what is going on? And then Cloud9 picks it in their like troll game.
Yeah.
And I was like, yay. I kind of take it, you know, but it's like, they were already eliminated. Yeah. And then it actually gets used and they win with the Ashe. I was like, that to me, that's my happy surprise.
Yeah, and actually it leads into my happy surprise, which is DRX being actually good. That team I had almost zero expectation for until I had expectation, then they started losing, so I had to go back to having zero expectation again. Massive overperformance from the team that finished 6th in the LCK, but then managed to have the heroic birth back into Worlds because Deft doesn't miss Worlds. He doesn't lose regional qualifiers.
Did you see Deft's interview too afterwards where he was like, I didn't expect to get here. Now I want to win. You know, he didn't come here, you know, expecting to like even get out of groups, and now he's like, well, shit. I guess it's time to win it all. Worlds again.
I just like this makes me so happy too because I feel like bot lane meta was starting to stagnate just a little bit. It was like the Lucian Namis or the Callista lanes, and then like or you to be Aphelios, and it felt like it had been solved, and then this just throws a spanner in the works.
After MF died?
After MF
you're like, all right, we saw that.
Well, okay, to be fair, like I was really happy when I hate MF and Pro, bro. I think she's so boring to like, she either hits the ult or she doesn't hit the ult. There's no big flashy MF moment. It's like, I'm gonna stand still, guys. Like, yes.
I also really hate attack speed MF because then the ult isn't that important, and she also has no range, so it doesn't do anything in late game anyway, and you're like, I've got this cool Kraken Slayer. Watch me use it on minions.
Both the games that DRX lost, by the way, MF games.
Exactly. Well, and then maybe that's why I hate it so much.
If MF died so Heimer can live, that is hands down the best trade in the history of League of Legends.
I mean, I would say I think the bot lane stuff got pretty interesting, you know, because the
bot lane's one of the best lanes as far as variety is concerned. It's really fun now.
I mean, the different priorities between different groups was also really interesting. Like when we were watching the GenG RNG group, right? Like Yuumi gets weird because you can't really play Yuumi against GenG, so like RNG can't play that. But then like both teams were showing such good Lucian Nami games that Lucian priority was really skyrocketing. Caitlyn was going like unpicked by some teams, and other teams it's like a guaranteed first pick. You know, some teams can play Draven as an answer into it, so that dissuades you from playing Caitlyn and stuff. So there's kind of like becoming, you know, much more of a spread of options, I think, down there based on team skill, based on player skill and stuff and priorities. So I think like the meta is going to be really interesting going into quarters.
I feel like you get so much. I mean, you're going to get that when you get exciting players like Lehens that, you know, are going to get rank 1 on elite support or something. And you're like, okay, well, let's bring out like this giant map. What do we have to think about to draft around this guy? Well, of course there's a Singe. Yeah. Then there's all these like elite support, all these different like things. And then we have this champion Senna in the game that now we have to do all these other.
Well, that's the carrier problem, champion. Like Senna existing means that carrier gets to play all of the champions that he has a lot of fun on. He thinks he's self-proclaimed best Yasuo on the team. and loves playing it.
then you have Meiko bringing back like Prime Thresh as well. And you're just like, I
the
actually credit
supports in knockouts are insane.
Yeah, I
by
credit
the
the supports with this exciting bottom lane meta
Blitz
mostly.
too. Blitz was actually so fun, and both the Blitz games actually looked really good, right?
Yeah.
I'm so happy that Thresh is back. Thresh is like, we haven't seen it in a long time. I forgot how much more interesting it is than Leona and Nautilus. Like those champions actually suck. They're so boring.
They're very
like
boring.
by comparison, it's like what was I doing, right? Like I
didn't expect you to be that blunt. Yeah, I agree.
I've just been watching like the Game of Thrones finale on repeat for like 2 years.
Oh God!
And then someone's like, "Have you ever watched the early seasons of Game of Thrones?" I'm like, "No, I haven't." And that's Thresh coming back.
No,
and then you're watching the episode where it's like dragons are
best
slaves and
analogy
then the
ever.
dragon's killing everyone. You're like, "Oh, Thresh is back!" You know?
It's the red wedding.
Rekindling your love for bot lane. No,
Yeah.
I really like it, and I think that the thing that's really cool is that you do have your clear power picks, but you have so many people who are willing to draft unconventional answers. And yeah, the AD carry pool feels a little bit more static. I think once you ban away Lucian and Caitlyn, it feels more open. I would have before
Aphelios.
Yeah, Aphelios
Yeah.
still feels like king. Those are off the table. So much utility. Love this champion to death. Happy to monologue about him anytime. But I would have also put Kalista in that list before the tournament. Or not before the tournament because I thought she was dead. But then when she came back. But with the Ashe, with the Heimer, there feels like there's answers to that. And I'm wondering if people are going to come out with Aphelios answers. I think it's impossible because he just does too many things like pretty well to really quote unquote answer him. But that is... Bot lane is by far the most thrilling.
Then we've got top lane. So
Top lane?
We have to make a sacrifice.
with old buddy Aatrox up there.
To be fair, once you ban Aatrox...
You can get Fiora versus Camille, which is always a fun one, boys. You know, haven't
top
seen
lane
that before.
feels like bot lane is obviously you talk about supports being comfortable with champion pools, but top lane is absolutely the most like I feel like player dependent because it's just there's so many people who are good at Fiora in this tournament, but if anyone else picks that champion, I hate it. Like I'm like, oh god, please no. If someone who's good at it picks it, I'm like, yes, great, a Fiora game. Zeus, Jace. Oh, great, Zeus Jace game. Anyone else picks Jace, I'm like, I'll believe it when I see it, buddy. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just like so ready for it to do
I think
absolutely
the Nuggery
zero.
guy did pretty well with that
Those
champion.
were my two. I was
Yeah.
like, guaranteed we're going to get a Jace. When they were doing like the total number of champions picked or whatever, I was like,
Yeah.
there's definitely going to be a
I thought that Jace had already been picked. Like I figured it just had. It's just one
when
of
it
those
happened and they
things.
were like 100 or whatever, I was like, oh,
yeah.
about time.
Yeah. I mean, it's good.
So who has been like, we talk about biggest surprise, but who do you think was actually the best performing player then coming through groups? Because I know out of play-ins, everyone was on the Zek hype train.
I'm still there.
So not biggest surprise. You think
I
just
think-
best player period.
So
from
like
groups.
what I'm not saying like best player. I'm saying
best performance.
biggest overperformance. Like from expectation
No.
to
We're
what
doing
it-
That's
MVP.
most improved.
No,
so like
no.
actual
Hold on.
MVP.
We're doing MVP.
Clarity on definition.
MVP.
Okay,
MVP
that's
is
different.
best player or is MVP is most valuable player? Because if you told me...
I'm going to say best performing player in Worlds groups.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would say that the other definition of MVP, where it's like
Most valuable for
carries
your
the
team.
most weight for their
Yeah,
team,
yeah.
Blah,
I
blah,
put
blah,
Zek
blah.
on that
Yeah,
list.
yeah. We
Zek
don't
in
need
top
that,
three.
though.
Whatever.
Don't muddy
Best
the waters.
actual player, that's a lot harder of a discussion.
I have 369 pretty high right now in
Yep.
my memory.
I got Meiko pretty high right now as well.
369 had about a 20 CSD on average from groups.
Mm-hmm.
That's
the,
pretty good.
The thing is too, with
Ruler also
369 getting so
averaged
much credit, I
1200
thought
gold ahead.
Yagao played insanely well too.
Mhm.
But 369 was playing so well that it split the spotlight a little. I feel like as well. So that one made it kind of hard for me.
Trying to think if there's anyone else who really, really stands out. I think again, knowing that like seeing the RNG struggle in performance takes a little bit away from.
Yeah,
it.
right.
When
I want
look
to.
at
I want to
GenG,
say GenG, but it's
that
hard.
context makes it tough.
GenG week 2, they looked turbo dominant.
I would say
GenG-
ruler second week or whatever. Yeah.
First week he was more.
Yeah.
I mean,
And even,
even
like-
with first week, Ruler still averages like at 11 minutes or something, 1,200 gold ahead, and like a level. Like
Peanut
it's
also,
like it's insane.
No, Peanut was not best. It can't be. I can't call him best individual. I just like Peanut. Big Peanut fan. Just shout out to Peanut. I can't call him the bad because he does some dumb stuff sometimes. But God, I love watching Peanut play jungle. I think 369 to me feels like the overall safest answer. I feel like if you want a different answer, you have to be willing to dig deeper. You know what I mean?
I mean, ruler was my other one I was bringing as well.
Zeus also looked really good week 2. Like watching that Gangplank game, like
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's so, but I think that's all the other thing too is I always have to check myself because my opinions are so colored by single games. You know what I mean? Because like that Shadow game versus 100 Thieves was incredible, and then he immediately sprinted it on the next Akali game.
You know what I found too, and this has happened. You know, when we do just random dive recordings, sometimes our rankings they're definitely influenced by which games you actually cast versus which you watched.
Yeah.
Because we'll have like different rankings on someone, and we'll just be like, wait a second, it's because I cast all the games where they won when he split push, you cast all the ones where they lost.
That's the worst too, because like when I cast a game right, I feel the emotion so much stronger about that player. I'm like, I feel like this guy was absolutely cracked. But then when I watch the VODs, it's so much more analytical. So I'm like, this guy is running it.
You're looking for mistakes more.
Yeah, if I cast the pop-off moment, I'm like, no, this guy's goated. You can't tell me anything. They're like, did you watch that back? I was like, no. They're like, watch it back. I'm like,
I will
he
not.
missed 4 skill shots.
Yeah, that does make me kind of want to put Marang on the list for that sickly sin kick. You know, like I cast that moment, man. Like he might have built Bomby sin. It doesn't matter. Still kick that guy.
That's the thing, though. Like even after like we talked about it and I discovered this, I was like, I'm not changing my vote though. That. I'm definitely right with the ones that I watched.
Yeah.
What about like Kanavi or even like Canyon or something like that? Like some of the junglers who are playing really well.
I don't think we haven't seen like 2020 Canyon performance yet. It feels like
the Graves game.
God, I feel like
his
Canyon so
his
much,
expectation level is so high that you need like just perfect jungling out of Canyon before you're like, oh yeah, this is vintage Canyon, you know, because he actually just won 2020 almost by himself. Like,
especially coming into it because everyone was like, oh, you should be worried though. He didn't have a good year this year. And then I was watching even their series versus T1 where they lost. I'm like, well, he's still Giga Gapped owner. I feel like
also like that was a close series.
Back to
in this definition of MVP, where it's objective best player, I think that like MVP is like where it's like most impactful player on your team. It's almost impossible to win as a top laner, but I feel like it's so much because top lane spends so much time in isolation. It's easy to look at a guy and be like,
the
this
1v1
guy is the best. Whereas jungle is still so lane dependent that even if you have like a great game, it's also so draft dependent. You know, like some games.
And it's also like brain dependent, plan dependent. There's a lot of extra things that go into it, but I think you can adjudicate it.
You certainly can. I just think it's a lot harder, and you have to be willing to comb through a lot more to make a case for like Kanavi as overall MVP versus 369. I think.
No, on the dive, we're all about just making unsupported claims.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
just throw it out there. Yeah.
Sweet. So I think that Rogue are gonna win Worlds now.
Trimby definitely best player of the tournament.
Don't ask me for evidence because I don't have it, but I have feelings.
And
most of them
valid.
are fear,
and your feelings are valid.
And guilt for potentially lying to you, gentlemen. But I gotta follow my heart. You know.
I noticed that you've also taken off the World's jacket, which you said you were going to keep on.
It is getting warmer.
I think he was actually going to have a heart attack if you kept that on.
I gotta be honest. You just reminded me about that 369 groups performance. I got a little hot under the collar.
Yeah, a little bothered.
A little fired up here.
All right, so
we don't have to come to a consensus.
All right, so actually, we don't need to come to a consensus. So I can just say Deft is the best performing.
Yes,
you can say that.
Thank God. Okay, there we go.
That.
It's
All
Deft.
right, it's Deft. There you go. What about the best game? I mean, for me, I'm still thinking almost back to like the first round robin.
It was the bug game until we found out it was the bug game.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And now it's back to JDG Dom 1 first round robin, right?
Yeah, JDG Dom 1 was really good. Yeah, the bug game was very good.
The ending was the most exciting ending.
Yeah.
For that one, and then but now it's tainted in my
It's
mind.
been mod.
Yeah, no, for sure you can't reference that anyone, but like that would have.
But
been
even like the whole game, because it was like, okay, well, they're clearly gonna put everything into Karthus. And like Levi is playing it super well, very efficiently. He full clears. He goes takes some shit from some lanes also. Then he goes full clear again right as soon as his camp is up. Takes some more stuff from some other lane while he's got a couple seconds left.
I love that about VCS so much because they're obviously like the OGs game as a whole when they did like the Rush Nocturne to 6. They are not afraid to be like, hey buddy, you don't get money anymore. Like this guy is your god. You give him everything.
That's why I fell in love with them at the very beginning because it's always the jungler that they're funneling to. It's never anyone else. You know, it's always a different jungle funnel strategy.
I like our other example of like the game of the tournament so far is JDG versus Damwon, which is two other teams that are very happy to funnel their jungler as well. It's like, that's just the type of League of Legends we want to see. Just give the money
One
to
guy,
the
all the
jungle.
money, build a raid boss. That's all I want.
I mean, God, when like in some of these series, I think that the priority on Graves is just going to be out of control, right? Because we literally have,
but it's going to be like different both sides of the bracket. That's
we have
the thing
we
that's
have
like
Canyon
super
versus
interesting.
Peanut, right? It's
Yeah.
just like first pick Graves or die.
And I think the interesting thing was more in groups, and I expect this to fall away in best of 5. The start of the groups meta was Maokai, you know, high Vi, you know, whatever you wanted to do to get ganks off. And by the end, it was like, we're literally banning Viego from every Chinese jungler. Like, there's just no one gets to touch. Because every champion, and this has been the trend of the tournament, I think we talked about this before, every champion we thought was out of the meta is in the meta still. No one except for Zeri has been removed. And like we went from, I think we have 2 clear looks as the jungle meta, and you have the guys who are willing to play the Viegos and willing to play the Graves, and I think Graves is best in class. And then you have the people who are like, we got to do something early game, so we're going to slam the Jarvan, we're going to slam the Vi, we're going to try to make the Maokai jungle work. Yeah, with varied success, obviously. We saw the Thresh games from Meiko supported by, you know, the Maokai games as well. But I am ready for more of the Viegos, more of the Graves, because I think these champions are just, they're actually very fun to watch. I didn't think I'd say that about Viego, but after he left for a little while, I was like, no, actually, I do miss you. Please come back, scary soul man.
I think he's fun in a scrappy game.
Yeah.
I think he's good with Lissandra.
Yeah,
I love the Lissandra Viego combo.
Yeah, I mean, you get the first reset, right? You get the first reset, and then like all the
Thrall me, baby.
Thralls or whatever they're called, they start popping out. I feel like actually kind of sleeper OP is Silas. Silas had a 79.
Is he sleeping? That man is not sleeping. That man is laying down chains.
Well, no one's I feel like talking about Silas as like a must pick, must ban.
That hasn't
I
been
think for sure he is.
I mean, I think you're right.
There's a lot of like.
There's just been so much focus, I feel like, on other champions that I feel like people have not.
I think they're not saying it enough.
Yeah.
They're saying it, but it's not enough because he's giga broken. Yeah.
I think that because if I remember correctly in plans, he was like the perma ban champ because people did not want anyone blind picking him, and then it clearly became Azir in the first week of groups that people did not want anyone getting their hands on.
There's some players that you say it more for than
Everyone
other
says
players.
it for Zeka.
Yeah,
but also like Knight and stuff too.
Yeah,
JoJo.
Chovy, you don't let Chovy play that
like.
champion.
And now we're whittling down to like, well, it's just all the mid laners that are here.
Well, now at this part of the tournament, like everyone is pretty dang good at Silas. It's just how it goes.
Exactly.
I mean, I think Faker had a couple of stinkers here at Worlds, but he's got plenty of tape, so you can find the good ones.
Well, and that's why it's interesting, right? It's like what's even the must bans anymore? Right, like is it just different going to be for every single?
I think every matchup is like really dependent. I think a lot of mastery is really important.
I feel like it just mastery is absolutely important. I still expect that we'll see Aatrox and Yuumi more likely than not.
GenG doesn't have to ban Yuumi.
Yeah, except for GenG.
That's
which is
one-
GenG is
that's
the one
one
exception.
team.
Otherwise, I feel like those are probably the 2 permas.
Quarter of the matchups.
I feel like Yuumi especially because
Only half of one of the one of the sides though.
Sivir Yuumi is just the dumbest thing in the game, and I think that we've seen every single team that has tried to counter it has had something slightly different, whether it's a Seraphine or whatever.
I think every team has an idea though. They have a plan.
They have and their plan
and they're not. They were waiting. They were waiting.
I don't.
What about the 100 Thieves game? I actually thought, unironically, they had a pretty good plan. Like they did end up losing, right? But 100 Thieves almost beat RNG.
Yeah, that Senna Seraphine was actually,
and that was like a close 40-minute game. And and if they actually executed better, I think they probably win, right? And they are.
That Baron was
worse
tragic.
They are a worse team than RNG, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, is there really no answer? I don't know. I'm not fully convinced. It's clearly incredibly good, but I'm just not fully convinced that there's like no context in which you can let it through.
I think the struggle is that if it's like the Senna Seraphine, they're both.
It is rightfully so, I believe, the most banned champion currently of the tournament.
To me,
because, again, if you're going to get the counter, it has to be very specific versus someone.
Yeah.
And everybody who let it through got blasted by it.
And
That's
Sivir-
6 times as well.
It's
That's
just
a
the sense
lot.
of inevitability, and the Yuumi also, even outside the context of the Sivir, pairs so well with other champions in meta. And I like the philosophy behind the Senna Seraphine, all this stacking things, this death ball, whatever. But I think that it's infinitely easier to get value out of the Sivir Yuumi more often than not. Sivir as a whole just feels so strong in what she does when she has a champion like Yuumi to empower her, like the insane wave clear, etc. The ulti against so much of this like Maokai, whatever meta, that extra movement speed to disengage or re-engage. And again, credit to 100 Thieves because you said like a little bit of execution here or there. I think it went both ways, but like we're
course,
able to get a lot of the sums out before the fights. We're able to pull the dives off up until the last very minute to kill the Sivir every single fight. But to me, still, it's just like Sivir, maybe not completely unbeatable. You're right that I think that's too much of a statement, but absolutely still like.
Well, like
best
poke isn't in the
bot lane
meta.
game
When
right
poke
now.
isn't in the meta, you can play Sivir because Ricochet does so much work. It's just you've got blobs of team fight happening, and you're collapsing in on one another, and there's not enough range, and there's no poke.
Yeah.
Outside of like a couple of Jace games. But if we go back to like Jace Zoe being played, and I've heard whisperings that there are teams that are experimenting with Zoe again, then like that then becomes a more difficult pick. I think Sivir loses a lot of value there.
I'll be interested to see if Kaisa starts to get more steam. You know,
Yeah,
with,
I agree.
with like full dive comps and stuff like that, because it hasn't been picked that much, but has won a lot when it does get picked.
I mean, Hope's Kaiser is still giving me nightmares, man. That's,
Yeah.
And
I think
Gala is healthy.
Yeah, he's pretty good at
be-
Kaiser.
I
He'll be
feel
a
like
good
the
one.
struggle for Kaisa is that just Aphelios is so good, and it's like once the other champions are banned, you pick Aphelios, and it's just like champion does so much, and you're gonna hit a point in the game where the Kaisa can just jump on the Aphelios, assuming he doesn't have perfect guns. But I just think that it's so difficult to like get through that laning phase, get your engaged support, get those combos, and maybe as we get more, especially strong top laners, more champions who can set up for the Kaisa to just not be a backliner, but be that person who goes in with the divers, it can happen. It's like the 80 carries that are left after you ban the OPs are actually Aphelios is just so good across the board. It's hard to match that.
Caitlyn's getting a lot of bans right now. I think more teams might start letting Caitlyn through.
I agree.
And shifting it that way.
I don't know.
It's funny too because Aatrox is second most banned champion and still the most picked top laner.
Yeah.
It's like every game, if it's not banned, that shit is first pick.
That is first pick every time.
It is so interesting though, right? Because there's these certain champions that are banned so often that sometimes teams kind of stop practicing them and stuff. It gets in this weird part where people are like, oh, well, it's not really worth practicing Caitlyn because it's gonna be banned all the time. And then it gets left up and you're like, well, I guess we're picking Caitlyn.
Yeah.
You know?
and it
Flying
messes up
Oyster
what you were
game?
planning before of
Yeah.
your draft because
Yeah.
you're kind of assuming some base.
Caitlyn is one of those ones where I think it will still be high ban presence because now all the teams that are left in the tournament are scary. Because like we saw, I think we
and you got like
played it.
Gumayushi, Deft, Viper, like so many
CFO
of these
played it,
players
and it
that have
was
been
bad.
very good
and
at
it's
it in the
clearly
past.
like it as a combo. Like Aatrox feels universally OP. Sivir Yumi feels pretty
I'm
universally
pretty
OP.
scared of Aphelios Lucian right now. So
Aphelios Lucian feels strong, but
sometimes it's like, what about that Caitlyn door? Let me open that back up. I don't know.
yeah, but I'm just like, to me, it's like
Lucian's looking broken.
I think Lucian is way more important to ban than Caitlyn. I'm expecting Lucian to be banned as well as Caitlyn if you're going to be playing, in the bottom lane.
Caitlyn Lux does not feel like guaranteed anything. You know what I mean? That's the problem.
Guaranteed push.
So
Guaranteed push, early pressure, tower place.
How much are we kind of like influenced though by the fact that Caitlyn's 3-3, Flack Edge, Shun, and Comp lost on it, right? The people who won on it, Deft 2-0 and Ruler 1-0, right? So it's like, how much are we influenced?
And Ruler ran at that game. He's not a Caitlyn guy. It's not his favorite champion.
Yeah, it's just interesting, right? Because it's like with some of the things when, and then you look at Salas and like every Salas game is like all like LPL or LCK mids are like the only people who played it. And you're like, wow, Salas is really good. And it's like, well, like how much are we influenced by who is playing the champions? Can be one of those things where it's like, you're talking about the certain games stick in your mind sometimes, right? Where obviously like the comp game was a turbo disaster. That was the one versus like versus Draven, I think, right?
Yeah,
for example.
the CFO one was bad too. I'm with you, and I think the thing is as the player quality gets up, as we get deeper and deeper into the tournament, the lane regains that status as like has to be banned because it feels so impossible to beat and so impossible to play against when it's done well.
Can't ban everything.
But
though.
the level of execution required for that lane, or like the amount of mistakes you're allowed to make when you play that lane, is just so much lower than any other lane, I feel like. And that's kind of my only issue with it. Yeah. That doesn't mean that we're not going to see it. Like if it does end up being picked, like Deft isn't just going to smash everybody with it. You know what I mean? But I will definitely say that for anyone who isn't like the best of the best at that lane, that pick I think just looks. If you're not playing it at S tier level, that lane looks like instantly like D tier, as opposed to Lucian, where you're not an S tier Lucian, he's still like a great pick.
You still have culling.
Still have culling.
Everyone has culling.
You can always offer that back.
Gale Source Imperial Mandate a guy. You know what I mean? Just like you can get guaranteed some value out of that one.
I'm like thinking, and like the more I sit here and think about the bottom lanes in the knockouts this tournament, it's absolutely absurd the skill level of like even like Comp and Trimby. That was the reason why like Rogue looked so good. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to take credit away from players like Marong, but like I'm thinking about like oh, Gumiushi Keria looking like spring level form. You've got like Hope and Missing who have looked absurdly good. Then you've got Viper and Meiko, world champion bottom lane, that just have always been
that
amazing.
ruler fellow there.
And that ruler fellow, and like Lance pretty good as well. And Deft and Beryl. I mean, Beryl is a weird person to talk about. He's also a world champion though, and like has been performing in this tournament super well.
Yep.
Like the bottom lane, I'm just so hyped on bottom lanes. Like I think every single one on every single team is like really exciting to think about.
So should we jump forward to our first matchup then, and we can kind of talk a bit better about this?
Yeah, let's talk about the bottom lane, the first
so
matchup.
Rogue JDG is the Thursday matchup. I don't know if this stuff is TBD or still getting changed or whatever, but anyway, for now,
I think it's locked.
Rogue JDG is Thursday. As far as the meta goes, I mean, the biggest questions I have are all on the Rogue side now.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, we saw this happen to Fnatic, where it felt like Azir got removed from Fnatic, they started to struggle with Rogue. It really felt like about removing top laners from Odo.
Yeah.
And the biggest like, oh God, what is happening in this draft to me moment was, I think it was their tiebreaker game, maybe, where Rogue was red side and they still have to pick, I believe it was like maybe their jungler and their top laner.
Yep.
And they end up blind picking Gnar on 4. And it was just like, there was a bunch of top lane bans and just felt like, oh, you don't feel like you have any picks left. And that to me was like so concerning, where it was like all day they had been losing, and like Maokai and Ornn and stuff are just getting banned against them all game.
Mm-hmm.
And then they caught a couple more top lane bans in the second round of bans. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're out of picks. We need to blind. Felt really weird. Or maybe it was just oh, we need this for the comp. But like that was so concerning to me. And then immediately you just get clapped by Camille. All right, like that's going to get locked in. And
the comp was rough as a whole. Like I think the Gnar argument for the comp was tough. And don't get me wrong, Odo played the pick fine in game in the early game. And eventually he did get run over by Kingin, but he was doing well early game. But this, as a whole, felt like a very, very lost Rogue. Ezreal as a pick, if you are not the best in the world on Ezreal, I just don't want to see it. You know, it just felt like Rogue, I don't want to say drafting scared, but we're on the back foot that entire draft. And the problem is, as a person who's followed Rogue, right, like their ascension to greatness was so completely unprompted by their previous games. And they talked about it and it was like, oh, we all like rallied and we came together and it solved a lot of our internal fighting. And then like week 1, you're like, damn, it's going to keep going. And then week 2, you're right back down. And as someone who's watched them for so long, it's like, can they do that again? Can they have that moment where they all come together past just the gameplay stuff? Because...
And if they do, will it mean anything against JDG?
This was the whole day was bad, and then this was like the fact that the draft was also terrible in their final game is like, damn. It's like the individual performances whack, the drafts whack. You know, it's just like the list just keeps going.
I made a meme at the beginning of the day. I almost had to change it because I had the like EU week 2 was like down in the dumps, and then Rogue was like the shining angel coming, like giving them the helping hand to get out. And I posted after the first game after they won. I was like, easy, you know, they're in.
Nice.
And then I almost had to change it after they lost. They got stomped in the other games. Everyone was like, I think you mean Gam is like the angel to lift them up out of week 2. It's like, man, yeah, they completely just like fell apart off all the improvements, and it really looked like they're gonna have to practice and come up with some new stuff and change like now. So like if you have an angle for your Hopium, it has to be that something in these few days here leading up to the series, they smash in scrims with, or they've got some crazy pocket picks, or they completely changed their how they set up.
The problem is that we've seen one version of Rogue look especially good domestically and now internationally as well, which is like more early game focused bot side, more aggressive bot lane picks, scaling mid lane control mage,
Odo
preferably
tanky.
Azir, Odo tanky engage, and Malrang just playing any psycho pick that can just gank like 20 times a minute and never farm.
And hopefully Jarvan.
You know what I mean? And the fact like that is great when everybody wants to handshake on playing that meta, but you already have across group so many different reads. You have people who are willing to play much more things like the Graves, willing to play top lane in a way, and people who can pilot top lane champions well enough that like Ornn is no longer just OP like it was domestically, I think, for LEC, like it has been domestically for LCS as well. Like when people play Ornn counters, Ornn literally does not get to play the game at this level. It is not like it was domestically for us where he just sits through fine.
The people you're talking about R369.
Is that guy? Yeah.
R369 and Zeus.
He's in charge of that club. There's like a club for top laners who will like body you, and he is captain of that club.
And I think this is possibly like the biggest single lane mismatch in the entire knockouts, right? Like I don't think it gets much worse.
Yeah, I mean at this point, yeah, and
that's a lot of lanes for me to think about.
It's not that I want to discredit Odo Wamne because I think he's had some really bad games. Don't get me wrong, but I think he played really well domestically.
I think if he gets to team fights, Odo looks unbelievable.
Yeah, and the question is, because I know EU teams have been scrimming not nearly as many tank top laners as they have been playing. You know what I mean? They've been scrimming a lot of aggro top laners. But that said, even if they show us that, even if they bust that out, which we didn't really get to see in the group stage, faith that you are going anything other than even at best against 369, like that's the W.
Carry versus carry against 369 just seems like so terrifying if that's your answer. And I will like walk back what I was saying a little bit earlier because like I said get clapped by the the Camille, and I meant more through the sense of like as like a draft answer because you're totally right in the laning phase. He actually did well. Valorant got up there. He was actually ahead. He was I think even the richest person on his team for most of the game. Yeah. But it just feels like Rogue. Like they even though Odo was not playing bad by any means on the NAR, it's like they didn't really have like a way to function with their draft or an easier like kind of answer or win condition. Whereas prior it was just like Odo on something real tanky, group up, team fight well, win game, right? Yeah. And it gets obviously way more complex, I think, when you are pushed off of those kind of like death bally type comps. Yeah. And yeah, I mean the answer obviously seems like if S tier tanks are gonna get banned out, you can go either to carry versus carry, or you go B tier tanks. You can go stuff like Malphite and Scion and so on and so forth, and you can try to go to that. But the problem does remain, like, and to me, the reason that the LPL and the LCK teams can deal with those picks so much better is even though obviously the top laners are amazing, it's more about how the team plays around it. It's a great because point. They stack waves and they dive those tanks early before they can actually get to the point where they're stable, right? And then they never reach that like, oh, you don't hurt me point, and they're just perma behind the rest of the game. And that is the biggest thing because the tanks in the early levels are useless.
And the most terrifying part is even if let's say champion pool expands, tanks aren't an option, we get carry versus carry, you make it through the lane and you're fine. LPL LCK teams as a whole are so much better playing mid game and late game with carries. Like that's the other part that's terrifying is like I've seen so many LCS and LEC teams just run around with headless chickens when they have a Fiora on the side lane, when they've got, something that isn't just like big, hard CC engage option, and they are just like trying to find
LPL is also better at it. Like I think that like LPL cross map play is really, really good. Like their split push play. And like I want to just clarify real quick, like I don't think it's because Odo is not a good enough player or something like this. I say mismatch because 369 plays aggressive top laners so well, and Odo needs to get through a lane before you see his true potential, right?
Well, and he's fine. I think he's a fine laner when he has the two of the lanes. He's often taking the weaker side of lane matchup. This is not to say Odo is a bad player.
No, exactly. That's what I wanted to.
I think 369 is the best player in the world.
Yeah, it's just like, and that's the thing is it's like what the team needs from him puts him at a disadvantage already. And if we ignore that factor and we put them in isolation, I still think 369 is clearly the better player. And it's like, I would not put any player in EU up against 369 with confidence. And that's the thing. It's not, I definitely don't want it to feel like we're just bashing on Odo. It's not, there's basically just the deck is stacked against Odo in every way possible, both in terms of nameplates, in terms of how his team likes to play, in terms of what we've seen his team play. And and obviously there's so many different angles you can attack this matchup as a whole, but that is the one that is the clearest to see based on what has led Rogue to success so far.
I like your point about, you're talking about like the way that these teams play around carries too, because I felt like the RNG 100 Thieves game exemplified that so much, where it was like, we have this like super death ball comp with Senna Seraphine and whatever, and you get to late game against Fiora, Vi, Akali with Sivirumi. Like, Sivirumi are strong, but like that is a hard comp to pilot where you have to be coming from all these different angles. And like the barrier of execution is so much higher for a comp like that, that if you don't play out the team fights from these multiple angles and have those like the fight kind of split up into these little skirmishes, you just get blasted. And it takes a really, really skilled team and really skilled individual players to actually make that work. And the LPL teams can do that.
And part of the reason why 100 Thieves weren't able to win that game is because of how good RNG were at respecting the Seraphine to a certain degree. Now there were some games where they like piled in too many, and but like we watched those last few fights, it was just impossible for Seraphine to hit more than 2 people with their ultimate in any given exchange because the amount of different angles they were approaching from was overwhelming.
And it was still 100 Thieves that were feeling the pressure in that moment as well. And often for a composition that has Center Seraphine, you're chilling. You're just like sitting back. But 100 Thieves were the team that felt like they needed to make the moves.
Yeah, you got Victor Seraphine. In theory, if it's just a battle of wave clear, you come out on top. But they were pulling them across the map. And so many times it was like, in order for us to be here as 5 to contest this objective, we are accepting a 500 or 600 gold loss, whether that's from losing a side lane tier 2, losing a couple of waves. Like, and that's a terrifying position to be in. Like, I am nervous for this series. I think that this is very much stacked against Rogue. Again, the possibilities that you mentioned earlier, Kobe, where like they show us something new, they dig deep, that's always there. But based on what we've seen so far, heavily JDG favored. I would say from my side, giving Rogue the benefit of the doubt that they're going to show up in best form. I think they will get a game, that they will maybe get 2 games. But unless there is some dark technology deep in the scrims that we have not seen yet, if they're not busting out crazy picks, it's just...
I think anything but a 3-0 is an upset.
Yeah.
Me too.
That's fair.
100%.
I want 3-2 for EU Pride as the last representative. But
if Rogue can get to 3-2 against JDG, that is an unbelievable achievement.
Yeah. And again, I think it can come off as very negative, but it's like, I think 369 is the best player in the world. JDG before the tournament even started was my pick to win Worlds. So it's like, guess what? I'm going to favor them against literally everyone.
Like our LCK analyst Wolf had JDG to win Worlds as well, right? Like, and we've got some pretty good teams if he wanted to be a little biased. So, yeah, I'd say that it's probably one of the toughest options that you could have possibly got. And by one off, I mean the toughest option that you could have got. It is the
toughest option. But to be clear, as to how grim top 8 was going to be for EU all the time, we were praying backstage for T1.
Yeah. And I think Zeus is
also very insane. But like, understand how rough the circumstances are where you're like, I'd like to go against the greatest League of Legends player of all time, please and thank you. That will make my life easier.
It's good luck.
It would be less of a 3-0.
Less of a
3-0. Speaking of T1 then, shall we move along to the T1 RNG? Because this is the game with the most possible history in International League of Legends that you can actually have. These are actually the 2 organizations with the most wins of any organizations all time for international.
If you want to do 0 actual in-game analysis, it could just be like, talk about what's on screen, mention it. And this reminds me the time they played in 2015. And this, man, like, you could just literally not talk about the actual game in front of you for the entire best of it.
No other orgs are even close to these 2 orgs.
So T1, 142 wins at Worlds. Plus MSI, RNG 124. Next closest 77.
Yeah, it's not even close. It's this is so exciting. So
history, legends, legacy, kings, the greatest of all time.
Do we allow it to go back to 2013 though? Because that Starhorn Royal Club is kind of sort of royal, but
we do.
They bought King's position, you know, like
the answer is yes.
We can it.
The funniest part to me is it's just like shout out to our stats team. We made this wonderful chart of like every time they played in a tournament or how they finished against each other, their international history. It's just always Faker. And like at this point, the baton has been passed across RNG a number of times, but it's just literally just like this organization just has to be annoyed by Faker. The players may not hold on to that rivalry, but this org just has to be like every
I imagine Korn is still sitting back there being like, oh no, if only Faker didn't exist, that would have been good.
Of course, at the very, very, very beginning, you were like Uzi, but Xiaohu and Ming as well. Like they can carry the torches. They can carry the torch for so long, years and years. Like it's not as flashy as Faker, but Xiaohu to me, this man swapped roles for this team and still kept them some of the best in the entire world. You know, still he's a big part of almost all of these wins.
The Xiaohu Ming
for this team. He was one of the best top laners, one of the best mid laners. Like this man has done so much for this team. It's insane.
And Xiaohu inspired LCK players to role swap as well. Like we have Dove over there and like his like main champion was also Na. Like it was like he was just like watching Xiaohu's tape, like show me your mid lane to top lane ways, please.
I think as players get better and better at League of Legends, we're going to not see a lot more role swaps. Because when you exist in a pro environment, you're expected to learn how every other role works.
I'm waiting for Canyons, dude. Canyon is insane at every role at autofill. When they had him mid, oh my God. I want to see a Canyon role swap.
Well, actually, that did happen, right?
Yeah,
that was,
I
that was
wanna
when
see
we
him
had
commit
that
though, right?
insanity.
Doesn't count.
Yeah. No, like Malrong was in there playing his role. I didn't mind the Showmaker Ezreal. That was kind of dope.
Yeah, but I mean, it's focusing on the series. Obviously, like taking a break from the history because there's a ton of history. I think what excites me the most about this matchup is like how different these teams can be and have been stylistically. Now, we did see a shitload of Akali from Shadow on the second day or on the second week, but week one was a lot of facilitators, a lot of setup, super aggressive junglers. Like I am really excited to see because this feels to me like one of the matches where we get the clearest clash of metas outside of any GenG game, again, just because they delete Yuumi from existence by being there. But I'm really thrilled to see how the styles match up.
I will say though, that's kind of what Faker did during the regular season and stuff during summer.
That's
right?
Faker
Like,
and Shahu are so similar.
yeah, so it's like even though like we were seeing them depart a little bit from their styles, like obviously first couple games from T1, Faker was playing Kale, Shahu was playing some of that and stuff week 2, but like if you look at like summer holistically, I think those players are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
They're more about facilitating their team. I mean, I just think this side of the bracket is just the top laner gauntlet, right? Because we have 369, we have Breathe, and we have Zeus. All on the
And
same
Odoamne.
And Odoamne.
and there's another guy too.
Yeah.
And it's like it's the 3 best top laners in the tournament, right? Like, and I think it's so exciting. Like anyone who makes
oh my
finals
God.
from this side, it's just like you have so much to flex, right? Like I do think like I favor 369 as the best, but like Zeus is right there. He's absolutely insane, right? Like who's gonna come out on the day? Like if Zeus makes finals, very likely he beats
has actually
Breathe,
done
and then he
gone
beats
through the full
369,
gauntlet, yeah.
and then you're just like,
This
well,
is
yep, you're the best.
This is objectively the best top laner in the world.
Yeah.
Because it's not like we're in boring tank meta either. Like it's very likely we will see a ton of carry versus carry games. So this is actually a great meta to prove you are the best. Because now we can get deep into the weird counter picks.
It's so cool, right? And that is so exciting. I know we talked a ton about top lane for the other one, but like I'm just obsessed with top lane.
It's literally the gauntlet though,
bracket,
because you've basically got 369 waiting up here, and he is,
Or
like you
Odoamne.
say, a very high.
I mean,
consideration
Odoamne
for
can
best
also
in
run the
world.
gauntlet, guys. I'm just saying, Odoamne could be the best top laner in the world. You might be
If Odoamne
It's actually the greatest story of all
then he
time.
is the best. He is actually
His
the best.
entire,
Yeah.
okay, I don't want to dwell too long, but just if Rogue keep winning, the story just keeps getting better because they have literally never been the favorites.
Game
ever.
5, Odoamne is now
I don't
floating while
want
playing
to
League
add
of Legends.
spoilers, but I was on a show with Trouble last night, and she is all well and truly on the Rogue hype
Just
train.
hoped up.
She told me all of the reasons why Rogue are going to actually be the world champions this year. So if it all does come true, just have a chat with her. She'll let you know exactly how she
I'm
knew.
curious because short of psychedelics, it's hard for me to find a reason.
No, exactly. And I was worried about what was in her room actually that night, but still.
Zeus?
Yeah, it was misty. It was
Zeus
misty.
currently of the tournament is first in CSD at 14, almost 20 by the way.
Oh, God.
First in goal difference at 14. First in forward percentage, playing past the 50% mark on the map, and 13th in jungle proximity. He gets very, very, very little owner attention, and he is smashing every single lane. So that is literally like, I am doing this myself. Like this dude is actually insane,
And he's also played a bunch of different champions as well, as branched out a little bit. I've been so proud of Zeus. I think he's just been unbelievable this tournament. And the best thing is that like I don't think that takes away from anyone's claim that 369's the best, because it's a very different group, right? They got really challenged.
I feel like
by
that is so
Damwon.
split. I mean, he's pretty staunch on that one. I would
very close.
I would definitely.
That's
put,
what I'm saying. Like I would put Zeus up there personally.
Yeah.
But I obviously have watched a lot more Zeus than I have 369.
I just watched like, I don't know, 30 plus games of 369 this year, and just like, he just solo kills them every game. It's just like, well,
Can't really knock
he
that.
picks the champion, and you're like, I think this is a bad matchup. Oh, they're solo killed.
Today I learned.
I think okay. Well, I guess that's how it goes then.
Imagine you're a top
I think he's
laner.
been outscaled. Oh, he's in their backline. Oh, he won.
It's my favorite. Imagine you're a coach and you've literally only watched 369 games. You're like instantly the worst top lane coach of all time. You're like, this is a good matchup, you idiot. Play this.
They picked on quickly, renekton.
Do you remember the Teemo into Aatrox attempt? Where there were like 3 Champions Queue games where he won all the Teemo top lane Champions Queue games. He's like,
ADD.
all right, I'm gonna bring it out. Oh shit, he got solo killed. I guess that's the matchup actually.
That's brutal.
I
But
mean, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that like I love talking about this matchup conceptually, but it's really I'm curious if you guys have strong feelings about who is favored here, because it's hard for me to make a call.
RNG T1?
RNG T1, like who do you think is a clear favorite? Because I feel like
I don't think there is a clear favorite.
really, because I think that coming into the tournament I would have said T1. Coming out of play wins, I also might have said T1, but the group stage RNG.
But right now,
RNG.
Wait, no. There is a right answer. Side selection.
Side selection is the favorite.
Yeah, side selection is the favorite. If T1 gets blue side game 1, GG. It's over.
Well,
I've seen that best of 5 before.
If you're saying it's based on that, then to me that's saying it's
I'm
really
making a
close.
joke. I'm definitely making a joke.
I know you are. But like,
I also think, how much RNG recover from
I think that's actually the biggest elephant in the room.
COVID
Right?
as well.
I also, assuming everyone recovers, because I'm just going to assume that right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want to have the
we
discussion in any
Yeah.
other capacity, because I just think that it's just not a fun discussion, and it just feels like it takes the wind out. I think that top lane, I could see going either way. I do think Zeus overall I would favor more. I think the biggest thing for me is bot lane, actually, just because I think that Gumacaria have had a lot of ups and downs, and I think going back to Aphelios, great for T1 overall, but when it comes to the depth of champions at this moment that I trust Gala and Ming to like absolutely carry a game on, there's just a lot more options, I feel like, from what we've seen. And not to discredit those players, because again, I think despite Guma maybe struggling.
I mean, I trust Ming to carry any game. Honestly, the guy is so freaking good.
I give that edge to the bot lane. Now, how that actually manifests in terms of strategies overall and where teams want to put their attention, I'm not sure. It's not always easy to make those advantages appear depending on what the draft looks like. But like that's the edge that I give RNG over T1.
What about Wave versus Owner?
I give Wave. Owner to me, again, like going back and even coming into the tournament, like prepping the LCK games, Owner to me was going to be the biggest like liability for most matchups for T1.
The door.
Of course, Guma Yushi, but Guma has played so much better at this tournament.
I think Guma's kind of proved himself, and Ona hasn't quite got back yet. We making Hodor references over here.
No, he just said the Doran of T1, and I'm like, that's just like the most savage double kill of all time. It's like everyone knows what you mean, but they feel bad that they know what you mean.
I don't think I'd go that far.
But yeah, it's Owner or Guma that's like, and a lot of people are still like Guma haters from the season, you know, because they're like, he's so overrated. Ha look. And they like got so vindicated that now that he's performing well, I can tell they're all just like quiet and waiting for him to mess up. And then they're going to be like,
they'll be back in again.
So, look at him.
Yeah.
Until I see the confirmation for my bias, I'm not talking.
Yeah. So those two players, I think, definitely have the biggest magnifying glasses.
I mean,
I agree.
And it's like in this current meta, I just feel like jungle is so important, because if you have two mid laners that are playing a similar style, that are trying to play a facilitating like push and move type of style, which I do think like is the best style for these two players right now, with Shahu versus Faker, then to me, so much of it comes down to how you work with your jungler and your support, right? And when I think about how RNG was playing, and it's like I give them a bit of a pass in their like final games, because they just looked like they were having a really rough time, obviously.
Yeah, especially the tiebreaker was not even real.
Yeah,
like, it was just
and it's
bad.
like we look at RNG sport, like how heavily they're roaming. We look at Wei, and it's like I'm kind of thinking it's like, okay, well, if they can actually get Shahu ahead through mid lane, well, then that's where you really start to affect the side lanes. You know, Gala has been playing really well. Breathe is obviously incredible in carries. That's where I can see Wei's in for RNG. And I know that like on pick'ems and stuff, it's kind of interesting because you can see community sentiment, and it's like 80-something% have predicted T1. So at least community sentiment is
that's not a prediction. That's a we love T1. That's what that
But
means.
to be fair, most of those polls are we love X team.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, historically, like T1 also has a huge historic advantage in the record over RNG. You know,
if you look outside of this year, right?
A lot of players have changed. The one thing though, when I was thinking about Owner, and I was gonna start talking about like some of the games where he, especially when you're at Worlds and you're playing versus all these amazing junglers, it looks like his plan is not as fully fleshed out for jungle path into what he's going to do as a lot of the other junglers here. But then I'm remembering, and we already talked about the bias of the games that you cast, the Wei Maokai game, where he literally walks in as Maokai at the beginning of the game, feeds Ruler first blood, and they lose the game off it. And so now I'm like, well, if I'm gonna dock Owner points,
I
also gotta dock Wei points for that. So I think it's close.
I think it's actually it's a really interesting conversation because there's very similar reasons to dock points in almost all of the lanes, right? I think clearly Zeus is better than Breathe. I think we can probably agree. But
Breathe also had that.
He has had some amazing games.
He tried to 1v9 that Gangplank game.
Yeah.
That was the same game. That was the Maokai game. That was literally Wave versus Breathe.
Yeah.
People was like, come on!
But
And they were like, nah, sorry.
I love this series because it is so close. It makes me really excited because I think
Each matchup is so similarly close as well.
Yeah.
Xiao and Faker play the same way. The bottom lane's exciting. Like great
it's also going to be
supports.
so fun
what?
as a spectator because these are the kind of games that leave you with these MF Zyra moments where it's like comes down to like a single counter pick or a single option or a single strategy often defining a series. Because I think about like I love Xiaohu Lissandra. I want to see it picked. I'm like, oh, but like Keria will pick Soraka, and that pick looks awful against Soraka. But like, do they want to pair with a Callista? Because I would not be surprised if the RNG bot lane is ready to pull out an Ashe, or some other conventional counter pick. And that like infinite puzzle just feels so
Draft is
interesting.
so I just
So
can't wait
good.
to watch that series. I just can't wait. I'm just like every part of each
And
game
my
is just
only
so
hope
cool.
is that whatever you're drafting for your comp, you do not let it ruin the top lane matchups, which just need to be bangers. Because if you are drafting to facilitate your comp as a top laner and your name is not Odo Wamne, sorry, Odo, I just, tanks look good right now for you and the team, I will be annoyed. Like, I don't want to see it. I want to see you just win lane.
Malphite versus Maokai.
Yeah, Malphite. Yeah. On Sejuani, baby. Bring it back. There we go.
Unironically, though, the Ornn specifically versus Maokai matchups, I feel like Ornn has just been blasting so hard. I'm like, why aren't more people just letting the Maokai? I guess because it's so flexible and you can just put it in a different lane.
Yeah, you just don't put it there, right? Yeah.
Every example of that lane, I've been like, damn, Ornn's like...
Brittle is pretty good.
Yeah, Brittle is pretty
blasting
strong.
him.
You
He's
press
got some
W,
good base
and then
damages
the Maokai
there.
has to run away. That's the matchup. All right, let's jump forward to Dom1 and GenG. This is another really good one, and you and Chronicler were talking about how historically this has been this year very, very close. So I was really interested and I went back. In summer it was 2-1 2-1 both times GenG. In spring the playoff series was 3-2 for GenG, and then again 2-1 2-1 in the regular season. So
we always get our money's worth out of Dom1 GenG.
Every single time GenG has won, but
but it's been one game off.
It's been one
every
game
single
off.
time.
And I think it's also totally fair to say that the meta has shifted in a way that is good for Dom1. And hey, if it's always close, maybe that's the push they need.
And I think they are playing better. The
Dom1 has gotten consistently better over
Canyon
the year.
and the bottom lane, both looking good.
Which is really important when you think about how significant Peanut has been. And especially like just Peanut pathing this year is so awesome to watch. I want it. Like you want Canyon to come into peak form. So this is going to be a really tight matchup. Similarly, again, we talked a lot about bot lane, but Doc Dam Kellen, like guys who are willing to play weird stuff.
If you're an Aphelios nerd like Drakos is, you love Doc Dam.
It's so good. He does all the little nerd things and just get you fired up.
Aphelios nerd. I thought you were a Kane hipster.
No, I told
he a
you,
Kane
I one
hipster or
trick a
a
champion every year.
It depends how approachable he wants to seem.
Like if they
I
look
see.
like they would watch Naruto and or listen to My Chemical Romance, I probably one chick for champion. I don't know why. Like I can't help it. I'm like, damn, I am the Uggs pumpkin spice latte of champ enjoyers. You know what I mean? It's just in this case, it's like the Narutos and the whatevers.
I think also the biggest buff to Dom1 is that Nuggery is going to play every single game. I don't think we're seeing Birdle, so I think this is a positive for Dom1 versus GenG for this year,
And I think it's actually a really, really interesting conversation with like how Nuggery is going to perform. Because if he performs to the level that we know he can perform at, then that becomes a massive problem for GenG because we know that Doran has been, their weakest link on the team.
Yeah, up and down.
But if it's like, the let's go for a 0-6 power spike this game, like that's not like that will mean that it's a neutralizing matchup towards the top side. Doran absolutely fine on a lot of his like carry picks, like his Camille performance has been great actually. He's had a few different options, and then lanes across the board outside of jungle I think are very skewed in the favor of GenG.
Yeah, I think like you guys were talking about this, I remember on the day, but it's like how Doran kind of has this ability to have a really shit game and then just not have it phase him at all and come back and just play amazingly.
And he also, while he's having that shit game, looks so sad as well. It looks like it's affected him massively. He looks like he's just devastated by it. And then he comes in, sits down, and trashes you in the next one. It's like he gets all of the emotion out. It comes out of his face, and he's already done it. He's expressed all of that emotion.
Well, he is a unicorn in League of Legends. That is so insanely rare.
It's like Yagao. Yagao's the same.
And I question whether or not I'm like even a good person. You know, like, I'm ready. I'm like, was it worth it? Has any of it been worth it? Should I uninstall? Should I move on with my life? Is it worth it? So that is like credit to him, but also
walk off into a forest.
Walk off into a forest. I just need to rethink my life. You know,
my whole life is League of Legends.
It's like existential crisis every loss, depending on the loss. Sometimes it's close, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because for Nagri, Nuguri? Nagari?
Well, it's raccoon in Korean, which is Noguri.
But basically not a U.
Because it was the GN at some point how we were saying
it.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So
it's close
just
enough.
double checking. But I think that this is also another player who I can't say what does and does not face him, but he will have games where he is 8-0 and he'll have games where he like 0-4s Renekton, you know, very casually. In that sense, I think that I don't want to watch top lane in this series, not because I don't enjoy both these players, but just because there's so many.
It's heart attack inducing. Actually,
it's heart attack inducing, and I kind of just wanted to play a normal matchup so I can look at bot lane and mid, like please. But also, like at the same time, this has the potential to be This is the point of the most inconsistency I think that we will see in this series. Like I think we can see feast or famine from either side.
Yeah, I mean,
I think draft is going to matter a lot for how that matchup goes as well.
Absolutely, and I just think in general mid jungle is going to be so crazy important for this series because I've thought overall for all the Dom1 games that I watched in LCK, and I watched quite a lot of them because I do like watching Showmaker a lot. I always felt like this team looked so much worse when he's playing something that like he can't be proactive himself. Like he can't set himself
Showmaker
up.
Lysandra Dark Ages, dude. It was just
or like the quirky.
It was just like there was a few months there where it's like, is he even here? Like, it's very sad.
But like when he's on like a LeBlanc or or one of these types of picks or a Silas or whatever, where he can kind of like see his own play and set himself up. Canyon plays with him very well. They put him at some sort of an advantage. Then I think he can dictate the pace of the game and create opportunities for Dom1 in a way that no one else on the team really can. And I think it's so incredibly important that they really put him in that position because I do think that they have lacked that ability to push the game forward when Showmaker is not in a position where he is in control.
And
I agree.
In the battle of who stands in lane better, Chovy wins most of the time. I mean, the man builds gold leads just farming. And I don't think you want it to be this control mage versus control mage
robot.
CSing robot. He's unstoppable in that capacity. He can also do the big playmakers. And I look at Showmaker, and Showmaker's always an easy player for me to like look at and empathize with because he's so similar to Caps in that regard where like, yeah, you can give Caps.
Yeah, he has those psycho moments where he just does what you don't expect and wins the game.
Yeah, and if you put him on
Showmaker, playmaking maker.
Yeah, if he ever like needs other people to make a play or is like painfully reliant on other people, it's not the same player on stage. And that always just feels disappointing. Now, of course, things can change in the series, but that's my expectation. I think that's such a good thing to highlight because is his champion pool still functionally massive? Yes, but you do see a different player when he has individual agency compared to when he is reliant on someone else.
Yeah. My final thought on this series is it's so hype I lost my hair in spring. So it's goes without saying.
Are you going to put your hair on the line again or no?
I don't know. I don't want to because every time I do that, GenG comes out ahead, so I can't be given that bias.
You don't want
to.
The power to choose
it took a long time to get it back, and I'm kind of happy that it's back.
Well, the thing that made that so, and I think I tweeted
I'll
this
put
out
my
as
hair
well,
on the line.
okay.
Azael can do it instead.
Bold man.
Yeah.
I'll take one for the team.
That's either a bold move or a bold move. I'm not entirely sure which.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't bet your hair anymore, Max. You love your hair.
Yeah,
you got to bet anything else. Bro.
I actually did lose a part of my identity.
I know. I was gonna say like you are a hair focused man. As long as I've known you, the only caster I know it's like you and James who can like do your own hair to a professional level. And I was like, this man, why would he bet this?
We were walking through Times Square after one of the days. And the like famous like naked cowboy person out there on the street walks up to Max and he's like, "Nice hairline, man." It was like so random. We had picked out of the crowd. He walks up and he starts complaining about his own hairline. He's like, "Look what I'm working with." And Max is like, Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Mine's better.
I was like,
That is not what I said. I just said like, yeah, it does. It's not great. And he's like,
it's hard to think
don't know what
about
to say.
whether or not a man's hairline is good when he's not wearing pants. Like it's just not the first thing. That
But I
jumps out
just
to you.
love that Max just agreed with him. The guy came up.
He's like, the hairline could we use some work. The rest.
I don't know what he expected because it wasn't a great. It was a bit of a disaster up there. Like,
came up. He was like, man, your hairline's so much better. Max was like, yeah.
yeah, that's why you're wearing a hat. I don't know.
Like, your stars and stripes underwear is so much better, Mr. Cowboy. Like,
Yeah.
you could have thrown it back at him. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it should have. It was it was a weak moment.
He went home and cried himself to sleep. I hope he feels good himself.
no,
But
definitely
in a
did.
sing-songy country western tone.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. He was singing the blues,
Yeah.
but he did it beautifully. Yeah. I'm glad that guitar was in the way when he came.
That's true.
When he put me in
There's
a
such
headlock.
a thing
yeah.
as seeing too much. There's a joke there in a transition to EDG or DRX, but I can't find it. And,
Yeah, I don't think we should. That's not
Nope.
the way you transition.
Don't look
that.
too
But let's
deep.
go there anyway.
I've talked about this from the meme perspective. It's the most LPL style LCK team versus the most LCK style LPL team. Although I think those differences are getting smaller and smaller every year. But this one
is actually just Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers.
This one is gonna have such fun
Deft
picks.
first Meiko.
Mhm.
Deft first Meiko.
Yeah, Defos
Sunday in the bot lane. Viper versus Deft.
Okay, all I will say, central content team from Riot Games, we will make you a Monster Truck Rally commercial anytime with our combined voice acting powers.
Yeah.
This
and we will not
summer.
be able to say kid seats are still $5 unless they are $5. That's your choice. I'm not trying to push any agenda here. But we could say kid seats are still just like $16 or however much. I don't know how much it costs. $50, $100. Depends. If
Probably a lot of
scalpers are involved.
dollars.
Probably a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
I'm saying that I would just we could make that for you. That's just an option.
That was an
I feel
aside.
passionate
Okay.
about
I
that.
feel very passionate
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
What is our equivalent of Gravedigger? Is it just Showmaker?
Oh my god, wrestling intros. We need that too.
That's true.
Oh,
I've
God.
also never seen a monster truck rally, but the commercials are so iconic. Like,
The commercials are the best part.
I know Truckosaurus is there. Like, what else do I need?
Do you know what's sad? The Australian equivalent was like a certain carpet shop that would also do the same thing. And I'm like, monster trucks are way cooler than that.
You're
Extremely plush rugs.
Yeah, no, exactly. You want Persian? Like, oh, it's all
Feels great between your toesies.
I really want to see these carpet commercials now.
yeah, seriously, it was the thing, and it was also on radio as well. It's like you'd be driving home, you're like, oh man, I could really buy a rug. I could.
That makes a great point.
Yeah,
It would feel good.
Yeah, because he was really excited about it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Anyway, yeah, let's get into the final series because I can't stop thinking about the bottom lane, and then I think about the rest of the map, and I'm like, this is also super hype. Like what? Because
I'll
it's
be
also like Zeka that spent a lot of time in the LPL, and Scout, who is basically an LPL mid laner now that came from Korea, right? Like Zeka made the decision to come back to Korea, and Scout didn't this year. Although I think he was toying with the idea. This is sort of like this weird situation where if Scout had have come back, it could have been him on a team like DRX. I think he was aiming for KT this time around. But instead, you've now got it's Zeka that comes back, and we had no expectation, and now he's up against Scout. I think it's a really cool matchup.
I think it's mid lane, bot lane. I don't like jungle's fine. They just had great games.
You notice I didn't talk about top lane.
Yeah, Flandra, if he plays Gragas, I'm always excited. He's great at a lot of champions. He's a good top laner.
Flandra King are like kind of the same player, and we'll just let
King
that one
has
go.
some great lanes. And again, this is like they can absolutely be the center of attention depending on what draft gives us. But like Scout versus Zeka. Zeka, the big breakout player for me as someone who was not as familiar with the LCK mid laners. This is a guy who was not on my radar at all. And he has just had such an outstanding tournament thus far. Scout, obviously, long time iconic. Viper Meiko in the running consistently for one of the best bottom lanes, if not the best bottom lane in the world. The fact that these guys have history on top of it, and the fact that specifically Deft and Barrel have been some of the most creative bot laners, busting out the Ashe, busting out the Heimerdinger. I mean, this is just like, just keep the camera. Bottom side of the map. It's where I want to be. It's where I want to live.
I mean, I think it's going to be really, really exciting. And as much as, you talk about like, okay, it's not about jungle, it's not about top lane. I do think you have to consider the
I mean,
consistency
jungle
of
is
Pioshik.
very important. Yeah.
Because Pioshik, I think, is like more up and down. I think he's been more up at Worlds for sure. DRX in general, I think, have looked better than people expected. Zeka, I think, has been amazing. But I do think JJ works really well towards win conditions of EDG. And like EDG at their best to me is JJ working with Scout bot lane naturally winning 2v2, and then all of a sudden that slight 2v2 advantage gets slammed home because they both go bot, and it's a 4-man dive, and now you can't play anymore, right?
Yep.
And I think EDG does that better than probably like any other team, because they have such an incredible 2v2 duo, right?
Yeah.
I think pretty much everyone is like Viper or Ruler or our best AD, right? And in the LPL at the very least, like this was for sure the best 2v2 duo, I think. So I do think it's like it's important how Piotrek holds up, because I think he's gonna have a good series to try to like prevent that kind of win condition that EDG is almost always looking for.
I really think Draft is going to be the star of the series. It should be so exciting already with Beryl and Deft pulling out the Heimerdinger, and then talking about having more pocket picks in their interview afterwards, saying like, they're going to intentionally try and confuse them so much. But then you remember Viper. Viper
Viper's
on
like
Griffin,
one of the
he literally can play any champion in the game better than most of the
he
people
played
that made
Teemo on
these
purpose
roles.
and won.
What? He was a better bottom lane Vladimir than most of our.
He was a top 3 Vladimir in the LCK.
When he was in Griffin, he was a better Yasuo player than the majority as well. Like, I want this bottom lane to turn into like the 5D chess of like, okay, Beryl does this, and then Viper counters with this, and Meiko's still going to be on engaged stuff no matter what. I mean, it's going to be the creative stuff's coming from Viper.
Yeah. I don't think Tristana is like an S tier pick by any means, but I'm so ready for a Tristana flex in the series. Like someone to just throw at mid lane so you can play some wacky stuff bot lane. I'm ready for that. Oh, this is a dream. And I think the thing I love about this top 8 especially, and maybe we feel this way every year and I've just forgotten how we felt last year, but like this is the most where I feel like draft is super important because the meta is both so
It's
diverse.
what Jad said. I think the meta is absolutely amazing this world.
Super diverse, tons of different stuff. It's not a question of like, oh, well, this guy plays the
Except
Kai'Sa better,
Aatrox.
and Kai'Sa's, except for Aatrox.
Ban it.
Exactly. And
you always need a villain. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
And if that's it, if that's the only mandatory ban, hey, great. Usually,
well, I guess Yumi's the villain.
Yumi is definitely the villain.
No, Aatrox is the villain, and Yumi is the evil cat that he's like stroking.
He's
Dr. Evil Gadget.
Yes, Yumi. I shouldn't have gone to Inspector
Mr.
Gadget.
Mrs.
That's
Bigglesworth,
pretty old.
I guess. It's fine. Didn't just rewatch all the Austin Powers movies. They've not aged well. Anyway, I was just gonna say I think that we have so many close matchups where, and the meta is so diverse that it just feels like draft does feel more significant to me than it's ever felt. And it's always been significant in pro play, but it's not clearly outside of 369 again, where it's just like there's such a player gap here that I don't care what they draft. This guy's just going to stomp no matter what, and it's not going to be important.
I just want I want a legendary 5 on best of 5. Like, you remember the T1 Misfits, and you come out with some Fervor Leona, some game changing, Blitzcrank stuff.
Like the tech
or you
choices.
think of T1 versus Rocks Tigers and the Zyra Misfortune bottom lane support counters. To be able to like hide stuff like that deep into a tournament and get it to a best of 5 and have those things come out.
It's literally just always happening to T1.
Yeah.
I was like, T2 versus T1 2019.
EDG versus T1 2015. Like the most famous counter pick like in a game 5 ever happened to T1.
T1 has to be the most like.
Turns out when you're the best team ever and everyone focuses on you and you make every finals and you're always at Worlds and you're never...
They have the most wins at Worlds.
And you've been first 100% of the time in your group at Worlds.
It is likely that T1's there. Yeah, that's true. Or SKT.
Yeah.
Just fake it.
But,
Let's just say
I agree with you. Draft is really exciting. I think more so than previous years. But I also think that's partially a product of just how good the bracket is.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times... You like draft, you can be like, well, the one team's gonna get blasted, but if they do some cool picks, maybe they could win, right? That's kind of the draft discussion. But it's like there's 3 matchups here where I think it's totally legit to think either side can win.
And I think the drafts are going to be different in every single game as well. And I think that's a product of the game going back towards like mastery being really important. Yeah. Because you're looking at like Lehen's. But the reason why like that whole like Yumi thing exists is because he is so good at not only Yumi, like he was the greatest Yumi player in the world for a really long time, then was not allowed to play it, and then we weren't sure. But his singed answer to it means that you're not allowed to pick it, right? And like that's an example of a player making the difference on the draft instead of the champion making the difference on the draft. And like we have had metas in the past where it's like draft feels irrelevant as to which player is playing this champion, it's just too broken to exist, right? And that does happen a tiny bit, but I think it's the least egregious this year. That's sort of, I guess, my take.
I agree.
I agree. I think this is the most diverse Worlds meta. I think 2019 is still one of the most exciting just for the sheer amount of flex picks and the sheer amount of flashy picks. But in terms of like, coaches are sweating this year. That's what I'll say. Yeah. It's like, this is like the most important that it's probably felt like to come through solo queue and look at things because you just never, I feel like, know 100% what's going to be coming out. And shout out to the teams that have to adapt in such a tiny period of time, especially when it's highlighted earlier. The groups metas are so different. Not sure. I'm sure scrims are even crazier than what we're seeing on stage. So this is by far, I think, the coolest drafts we're going to see in a top 8 as a whole, not just in a single series, but in top 8 as a whole for any Worlds, I would say.
Yep, I agree. All right. I think that'll do it for us for now. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the LOL Esports YouTube channel for all of the future episodes. We're going to have another one when we're in Atlanta, another one when we're in SF, so you can look forward to those. Thank you very much, Atlas, for joining us.
Hey, you're welcome. It's great to be here.
Appreciate you. You're the best. Also, I get to cast with you this weekend.
Hell yeah, bit of a spoiler. Oh my God, I can't wait. They've kept us apart for so long. I had to cast with this guy multiple times, so that was great, but I didn't get any Azael, so... Very excited.
Finally
that finally happens,
next time you see us, we'll be in Atlanta for the preview of the semifinals matchups. Thank you again to Gotham Studios for hosting us today for today's episode. Make sure to tweet any questions you have or send it by carrier pigeon.
Yeah, carrier pigeons are accepted.
Has been shown as a very viable
especially
method.
With cool rune questions, because that rune question was really fun.
Yeah,
I want double face
structure.
Shout out to that. You got value out of that question.
We actually hit the jackpot.
We
cool
did.
delivery system and a good question.
Very interesting question.
Yep,
Yeah.
banger.
That's
Let's see
what
if anyone
happens.
can one up in Atlanta. Worlds Knockouts begins Thursday, October 20th. Rogue versus JDG, 5 p.m. EST. That is 11 p.m. Central Eastern European Standard Time. Tune in and see if Rogue can pull off the upset. We'll see you there.
Yeah.